Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Hunter. Mind capacity starting from Devil Fruit. Chapter 61. Saul. Hearing this name, Huang Quan resisted the urge to roll his eyes at the other person. Why don't you call yourself Thor? Through this name and the way the other person lied, Huang Quan was basically certain that the other person was Hisoka, who would be ridiculed as the god of toilet war in the future. My name is Odin, he replied lightly. A smile flashed in Huang Quan's eyes. He walked past the other party, and said with slight interest, "Every time I see you, you are killing someone. Since you are so interested in killing, why don't you play with me some other time?" Okay. Upon hearing the other party's invitation, Hisoka's eyes lit up and he said with great interest, "Odin. Judging from your chi, you should be stronger than these guys, right?" As he spoke, he squatted down and pointed at the corpse on the ground. His face seemed to be full of expectation. "You'll know then, Thor." After gazing at Hisoka for a moment, Huang Quan smiled and waved his hands, speeding up and running towards the dark alleyway in the distance. Behind him, Uvajin and the other people looked at Hisoka strangely, then followed Huang Quan's pace with some doubts. Although I don't know why Quan is interested in this guy, it is more important to solve the Black Jackal matter at the moment. That guy seems to know me very well. Hisoka, who was squatting straight on the ground, narrowed his slender eyes like a fox and looked at the disappearing figures of Huang Quan and others. In the few words spoken just now, he could feel the familiar and unfamiliar emotions revealed in the other person's words. Moreover, when hearing the name he made up at random, there was a completely different feeling of pause in ordinary people's expressions. Does this mean Odin is also a pseudonym? Squinting his slender eyes, Hisoka revealed a slightly weird smile, slowly stood up and walked slowly in the direction where the few people disappeared. Speaking of, that guy just sent out an invitation but didn't leave an address, hehehehehe. Time passes slowly. Meteor Street. Black Jackal Station. Top floor. Gia haha, you were really lucky. Seeing Brew in front of him who did not wither and die, but had chi barely wrapped around his body, Shugulu was surprised and couldn't help laughing. I didn't expect that a random drop of a penny could produce such an unexpected harvest. This was something he didn't expect at all. After all, hundreds of people had died before this. Actually, this is also the disadvantage of most of the poor people in Meteor Street. Without understanding the systematic Nen awakening and corresponding knowledge, you can only rely on your own will to survive the flow of life energy. Usually among 10 people, not one person can be left alive, and those who are lucky enough to survive will be called the chosen ones. This is all a gift from the boss. Feeling the surging power coming from his body, Blue looked at Shugulu with a respectful and fervent expression. As desperate as he was before, he respected him now. At this moment, Blue clearly knew that his fate at the bottom might be changed. Gift. Gia ha 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 ha. After laughing, Shugulu's expression gradually became cold, and he waved his hand and said casually, "Bins, from now on, this guy will be handed over to you to protect you and give him some methods of use." "I understand, boss." Not far away, Bins, who was holding a butterfly knife, nodded expressionlessly. Duluth's plans to attack the spiders in the middle of the night. Does the boss have any other plans? Midnight. Picking up the sharp claws that exuded cold light, Shugulu revealed a trace of murderous intent in his eyes, and said slowly, "Bring me back alive that kid named Ma Quan. No matter how stupid my brother is, the corpse can't be so complete." Ah! Suddenly, shrill screams echoed throughout the building. Immediately, the special alarm specially installed in the building also sounded. Because the building had not been renovated, the screams were as clear as if they were ringing in Shugulu's ears. His hands touching the sharp claws suddenly stopped and he looked up at the only door in the room. What happened? Velid. There is an enemy invasion. Next to the gate, Velid, whose eyes were as hollow as a blind man and whose hair was as dry as grass, moved the pupils in his eye sockets with 2 fingers, and a harsh sound like a duck's call came from his throat. There are 2 groups of enemies. The total number is 9 people. The stairs on the east and west sides of the building have been occupied by them. They are located between the 3rd and 4th floors. What about casualties? After hearing this, Shugulu's expression remained unchanged and he was still careless. Since coming to East Street, they have often been knocked on the door by the forces of East Street. However, from their current state, we can see what will happen to those guys. Heavy casualties. As if he didn't notice the instant change in Shuglu's expression, Velid said hollowly, the 60 members below the 3rd floor have been killed. The 30 people on the 4th floor can't hold on for long. The enemies are all enemies, it is recommended to withdraw first. What? At this time, not only Shugru, but also the other ninjas looked at Velid as if they were in disbelief. Not long after hearing the screams, the group of people they brought from North Street were just gone. Even if the enemies are all nemesis, they can't be that fast. Confirmed. Velid stopped rolling his fingers and said expressionlessly, you should know that this building is within the surveillance range of my blind roller. If you don't believe it, you can go and see for yourself. By the way, Dulu's head was chopped off with a knife. What a joke. Finally, Shugulu couldn't help but got angry, grabbed 2 sharp claws and strode towards the door. Come with me. I want to see what kind of guy he is, who dares to kill our black jackal people. Ta ta ta. In an instant, waves of subtle footsteps sounded in the dark and spacious room. 1 figure, 2 figures, 3 figures, until 9 figures. Looking at the different figures and mixed, terrible, auras emerging from the shadow corners, Blue, who had originally wanted to do something good because he had obtained power, shrank with horror. However, under Bin's death gaze, he had no choice but to follow these strong men who appeared out of nowhere. No problem. With so many strong people around, there will definitely be no problems. Like a quail, Blue followed Bin's cautiously, his eyes moving rapidly, observing the surrounding escape routes. Although the number of black jackals can fully demonstrate their power. But Blue had a vague feeling of crisis in his heart. This inexplicable sense of crisis had appeared many times in the gangs he had led before. And the result every time it appears is that no matter how powerful the gang is, it will eventually be destroyed and disbanded, just like the white wolf that was just destroyed. Thinking of this, Blue's eyes moved faster. Staring at Bin's back, he knew that the only one who would notice him now was this guy. As long as there was a conflict later, he should be able to find a chance to get rid of him. In order to survive, he could even give up his dignity, let alone a small betrayal. At the same time, ahead, Shogru stood in the middle of the stairs on both sides, lowering his head and looking down at the killings taking place between the stairs on the left and right. Seeing that there were not many members left, the murderous aura in his eyes suddenly poured out uncontrollably, mixed with the aura towards the stairs. Several people in the room pressed and left. Kill them all into pieces. Yes, XN. Following the uneven responses, the black jackals Nen were divided into 2 groups and rushed towards Huangquan and Krolo below. For a moment, violent footsteps pierced the air. It also attracted everyone's attention. The moment when aura and aura collide. The battle between the 2 sides is about to break out. Black Jackal Station. Stairwells on the 4th and 5th floors. Looking at Krolo and others on the stairs opposite, Huangquan didn't know how to describe this slightly embarrassing situation. Before the raid, I originally thought that the 2 sides would be separated and attack the Black Jackal from different angles until one party eliminated the guy Shugru. Result: facing the simple building with no decoration, Huangquan shook his head speechlessly, and could only lament that he had overestimated the Black Jackals. After 3 months of growth, he is still living in such a crude place. It's true, jackals can't change their habit of eating shit. Staring at the sweeping aura and the 2 groups of Nen people rushing towards him, the corners of Huangquan's mouth slightly raised, and almost at the same time as Krolo on the other side, he exuded the murderous intention of his own aura. Hachi. The collision between the auras seemed to cause a violent surge of airflow. Whoosh. Shaking away the blood stains remaining on the black demon, Huangquan held the knife until Shugulu stood on the 5th floor looking down, his expression revealing indifference. Go ahead and find a suitable opponent by yourself. Leave everything that can't be solved to me. Ha ha ha. From the back, he threw away the guy who had crushed his neck in his hand. Uvajin showed a slightly ferocious smile on his face, and his burly figure rushed towards the Black Jackal's nemesis. Let me choose first. After waiting for so long, these guys are finally willing to take action. Bang bang bang. Step by step, Uvajin ran towards the opponent like a bull. This idiot. Nobunaga put the long sword into its sheath, dug his ears, rolled his eyes and followed. Give me the one with the knife. I've taken a liking to his knife. Two reckless men. Shalnark, who was controlling the mobile phone, looked up at the two Uvagins who were about to be surrounded by each other, looking a little helpless. Compared to this kind of unknown hand-to-hand combat, he still prefers the battle of collecting intelligence in advance. It's just that he actually chose to take sides, so he still has to follow the necessary instructions. Thinking of this, Shalnark turned his head and glanced at Quan, who was standing with a knife. Although his figure was thin and slender, he faintly exuded the aura of a strong man. He immediately put away his cell phone and chased after him. Compared to Crollo, I always feel that Quan is the natural protagonist. I hope I didn't choose the wrong person. I went too. Looking at Huang Quan, who was looking indifferent at this moment with confusion, Maki carried the silk thread and intertwined it with him, and said softly, "I know you are much stronger than me, but you must protect yourself, you know." "The same to you." Hearing this, Huang Quan's eyes softened slightly. After seeing Maki also join the battle and led away in Nen, he returned to indifference and stared at the enemy rushing towards him. As for the stairs on the left where Crollo is, Franklin and others also selected suitable opponents in their own way, but because there was one less person than Huang Quan's side, Crollo could only face two enemies alone. Interesting. Crollo glanced at Huang Quan's situation, and the thief's ultimate intention emerged out of thin air, and he headed towards the two enemies. I just don't know whether Shugulu is on my side or Quan's side. Obviously, because of the angle of the load-bearing wall, he failed to pay attention to Shuguru, who was looking down. Boom boom boom. Boom 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 boom. Bang 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 bang. In an instant, the battle broke out and the killing began. Right. Huang Quan, who had taken the overall situation of the battlefield into consideration, held the sword in his right hand and turned to the left. While dodging the opponent's claw attack, the black demon that was ready to attack turned into a black light and slashed straight at the opponent's head. ... It seems that he did not expect the speed of Huang Quan's knife. Bin Si, who had no time to dodge, exploded with energy, pushing his body to turn hard to the right. However, even so, he still did not completely dodge the attack of the sword light. His left forearm, which was swinging unconsciously, was cut off to the bone by the sharp, black demon in an instant. Seeing that the opponent was able to dodge the long-awaited slashing attack, Huang Quan looked at the opponent slightly surprised and said with an indifferent expression, "The response is good, but I don't know how much force you can take." "Are you kidding?" As if he could faintly feel the pressure coming from the other party, Binz retreated to a distance. He looked at Binz, who had lost his left arm, and cold sweat poured down from his head. At this moment, he deeply understood that if he continued to fight, he would definitely die if he did not even dodge the opponent's sword. Bin Si raised his head and glanced at Shugulu Shang, his expression suddenly calmed down. However, just when he wanted to look fiercely at Huang Quan and prepare to attack him again. Call out. Phew. In an instant, a bloodless knife mark flashed across Bin Si's throat. 2 seconds later, blood seeped out, knocking his head straight to the ground. A large amount of blood spurted out. You must remember in your next life, never let your enemies out of sight. In the blood mist, Huang Quan's figure had already stepped through the blood mist and stepped up the stairs to the 5th floor. One step to the next. At the same time, the weight that became lighter due to the light characteristic gradually returned to its original state. Ta 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 ta. Not long after, when Huang Quan stepped onto the 5th floor. Whoosh. The sound of breaking through the air suddenly sounded, and several cold lights appeared in front of him instantly. Really impatient. Seeing this, Huang Quan's right hand seemed to turn into an afterimage, and the sharpness of the black demon slashed towards the incoming cold light in an instant. Bah! Just like cutting tofu, several sharp air blades condensed by qi were directly cut into nothingness by the black demon. It turns out, I have been wondering what attributes you would have. Staring at the short black jackal Shugulu with sharp claws on his hands in the distance, Huang Quan slowly walked towards him and said with an indifferent expression, "It turns out it's just transmuter. This makes me a little disappointed." "Who are you?" Shuguru, who had qi attached to his claws, frowned and looked at Huang Quan. "Although we killed a lot of people when we came to East Street, we probably didn't have any conflicts with you, right?" It's really confusing logical thinking. Glancing at Shugulu, Huang Quan said indifferently, spiders are not something that jackals can eat. Spider, spider. After repeatedly emphasizing, Shugulu looked at Huangquan with murderous eyes. It turns out it's you, little spider. Tell me, where did you hide that Shoggoth guy? Exactly. Since you dared to come, just stay here tonight. Feel sorry. Shaking his head slightly, Huangquan lifted the black devil to his chest and pointed it directly at Shugulu in an assault posture. I'm very sorry for overestimating you, whether you are really an idiot who can't see the form, or you are just acting with me here. It doesn't matter to me, the important thing is, I will take your life in advance, Shugulu. Boom. In the firm state, as the chi exploded under his feet, Huangquan's figure was like a sharp arrow shot out, and he moved with the knife and stabbed Shogru at extremely fast speeds. Murderous aura flashed in his eyes, and in an instant, the Shoggoth's hands covered with chi seemed to be drawing pictures in the void in front of him, cutting rapidly up, down, left, and right in all directions. Suddenly, sharp air blades whipped out by two five-edged claws, like condensed wind blades formed by strong winds, covered Huangquan's attack position. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Accompanied by the sound of breaking through the sky. Like a rapid-fire arrow, the solid air blade was covered by strong wind and flew towards Huangquan as quickly as possible. As expected, it is transmuter. Seeing this, Huangquan's eyes narrowed as he rushed forward, and he used his will to convert chi into the white chi of black and white chi, instantly turning on the light characteristic, causing his weight to drop rapidly. In an instant, when a lot of energy comes to cover, Huangquan's weight has dropped to just a few pounds. In an instant, he tapped his feet lightly, and his light body moved sideways like a paper painting, passing by with the speed of the wind amid the attack of the air blade. What? Not far away, Shugulu's pupils couldn't help but dilate when he saw this. He didn't expect that the Lingqi air blade attack he released would be dodged by the opponent in such a weird way. Moreover, it is still unscathed. Is this guy the Spider Crollo? Thoughts flash. Finally, a cunning and cruel look flashed in Shugulu's eyes. Since the other party wants to fight in close quarters, then give him this opportunity. Tread. At this time, like a butterfly piercing a flower, Huangquan's figure broke free from the air blade offensive. As the distance between him and Shugru became closer and closer, the white energy faded and the black energy expanded rapidly. Heavy. Due to the sudden increase in weight and chi, the black demon in Huangquan's hand turned into a sharp black shadow and cut towards Shugru at extremely high speed. Kid, are you looking down on me? With a loud shout, Shugulu, who had been gathering momentum for a long time, dodged the black sword light with his short body like a jackal. The sharp air blade that had been condensing chi on his sharp claws for a long time slashed diagonally at the blind corner of the extremely strange island, towards the side of Huangquan's heart above Huangquan's ribs. For this kind of blind spot attack, Shujaiyu has always been the best at it. Due to his short body structure and special wolf-like shape, before he awakened his mind, he had always been a weak ant at the bottom that others could bully at will. But after awakening Nian through the strengthening of Qi, the disadvantages in the past have already become advantages. In every battle in the past few years, Shugulu has not encountered opponents stronger than himself, but those people often end up dying miserably under his claws. Just like this time. This brat. Looking at Huangquan, who had lost all his sword power, Shujaiyu smiled ferociously, and the air blade on the sharp claw of his right hand suddenly extended, trying to pierce the opponent's heart with lightning speed. However, accompanied by a sneer, it suddenly sounded. See. It's like the friction between steel and iron. Why? Shugru looked in shock at the location of the chi that the other party could not penetrate. Why can't we break through the opponent's defense? How could this be the result? However, before he could react, in an instant, the black demon with the sword's power returned, and as Huangquan flipped his wrist flexibly, holding the black jade handle behind his back, chi exploded all over his right side, forming an extremely fast thrust, making his body look like a reverse spiral. With the force of dark thunder and lightning, it cut directly towards Shugulu's neck. The slight sound of body breaking is inaudible. However, the knife marks formed by the black demon have been deeply imprinted on Shuguru's neck. Next moment, bang, his head, full of shock and disbelief, fell to the ground weakly, rolling down less than 1 meter and staring blankly at the roof. It seems that he can't believe why he was so easily defeated by the other party. Whoosh! Weaker than I thought. Shaking away the unabsorbed blood on the Black Devil blade, Huang Quan shook his head slightly, bent down and grabbed Shugulu's head, and walked slowly towards the 4th floor where Shugulu was observing. I thought he would be a good opponent, but it turned out to be a guy who didn't even understand advanced application skills such as Ken and Ryu. Sure enough, one cannot be too high-minded about the quality of Nin in Meteor Street. Ta. Despair. Arriving at the observation point, Huang Quan lowered his head and looked at the various battlefields on the 4th floor. I saw that at this moment in the battle scene, there was a stalemate, an advantage, a disadvantage, a kill, or a collision. Depending on each person's style, there are various forms of fighting, such as Maki's silk thread, Nobunaga's knife, Uvajin's fist. There is also Crollo, who holds the thief's ultimate but can always keep his opponent under control. It's almost time to end. Looking at the battle below, Huang Quan squinted his eyes, sat down on the edge of the observation point, and ran towards the 4th floor with the head in his hand. Exclamation mark. With the head falling and rolling, the fierce fighting sounds on the 4th floor suddenly fell silent. Both Maki, Crollo and others, as well as the Nen who belonged to the Black Jackal, all looked at the head that smelled of blood. For a moment, the Black Jackal's pupils dilated, and a look of shock and panic emerged spontaneously. No way. It's the boss. It's the head of Boss Shuglu. How could he die like this? Boom. Suddenly, there was a shattering vibration from the 5th floor. Shut up, everyone. An indifferent voice then sounded. Looking at the people looking up, Huang Quan, who was sitting on the edge, retracted his right hand that was hitting the ground and said with an indifferent expression, Shuglu has been killed by me. If you Black Jackals want to get out of here alive, then use all your strength to defeat your opponent. The winner goes, the loser dies. There is no third way to choose. As soon as these words came out, suddenly, everyone's expressions changed drastically. Ha, nice job, Quan. Not far away on the right side of the 4th floor, Jin looked at his opponent with a ferocious smile. That's how it should be. The battle should be fought with all our strength, let's fight with all our strength. After that, he ignored the other party's reaction and rushed forward with a fist. At the same time, the others started fighting with their opponents again with different expressions. Only this time, the fighting was even more intense than before. 4th floor, left. Li Liao Jiao dodged the attack of the only remaining opponent. Crollo's expression became colder and colder. He never thought that that guy Shugulu would be so weak. He couldn't hold on for a few minutes before he was beheaded by that guy Quan. This caused his original plan to be shattered once again. Variables. For some reason, Crollo, who had always been calm, suddenly became bored and patrolled. Although he longed for the unknown and mysterious, he suddenly realized that he seemed to hate the feeling of being occupied by others in a leadership position. Think of this. A chill flashed in Crollo's eyes, and he stopped dodging. The moment the enemy approached, he pulled out a strange and weird Bian's knife from his waist and stabbed it straight into the opponent's vital parts to kill him. Then, looking up at Huang Quan who was also looking down, Crollo pulled out the short blade from the corpse with a cold expression and walked towards Huang Quan on the 5th floor. Ta. Subtle footsteps gradually sounded. And as the distance gets closer, it becomes clearer. Despair. The footsteps suddenly stopped. How? Watching the battle below, Huang Quan smiled lightly without looking back. Aren't you going to stop pretending anymore? Crollo. When did you find out? Holding the Bian's knife, Crollo looked at Huang Quan's back with a cold expression. During this conversation, I shouldn't have revealed any flaws. Actually, Huang Quan stretched out his white right hand, looked at the numbers on his fingertips that were changing with chi, and smiled slightly. You don't need to be so wary of me. If I were in your shoes, I wouldn't give up easily on the members I have selected over the years. What a disgusting smile, Crollo said with a cold expression. Why don't you continue to maintain your usual calmness? This is unlike what I have seen you do before. It's too tiring to live like that. Huang Quan smiled slightly, stood up slowly and patted the dust on his body. It seemed to be an understatement, but in fact the chi in his body was ready to explode at any time. After all, now I have some ability to protect myself. I thought you would explode after getting rid of that guy from Flippo, but now you can't keep calm. Thanks to the hard work I have put in over the past 3 months, my acting skills are on par with yours. Deduction. He. Hearing this, Crollo couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. Izumi, you are really interesting. From the first time we met, I realized, you are the same type of person as me. Cannot stand the constraints of others, full of individualism, unable to obey other people's orders. Stop. Huang Quan shook his head with a smile, looked at Crollo and smiled slightly. Actually, my personal characteristics are not as obvious as yours. But you were right about one thing, that is, I really can't stand the restraint of others, especially when underneath the guy who is weaker than me. Ha ha ha. Weak. As if he felt ridiculous, Crollo stretched out his 5 fingers to cover his face. He couldn't help but let out an inexplicable cold smile. His cold eyes stared at Huang Quan through his fingertips and said coldly, Quan, confidence is good, but arrogance usually means death. Do you understand? Could it be that the deaths of the Shoggoth brothers and Yuri gave you the illusion that you were powerful? By the way, I've always been curious about something, and I don't know if I can get the answer from you right now. Tisk tisk tisk. It's really interesting. Looking at Crollo's appearance after taking off his disguise, Huang Quan couldn't help but click his tongue, pulled out the CCEC Black Devil inserted next to him and laughed. Your character is much worse than I expected. Do you want to ask me why I hide and avoid Nen in front of you again and again? As expected, hearing this, Crollo's eyes flashed with murderous intent, and he said expressionlessly, Can you tell me how you know my Nen? Of course it depends on this. Stretching out his finger and tapping his head, Huang Quan looked at Crollo with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Why? Are you not going to use memory? Was this guy still around? Hearing Quan mention the word memory, Crollo's pupils suddenly narrowed, and his right hand unconsciously clenched the weird Kaspersky knife. It was obvious that before talking to Pike Notan, he carefully observed several corners suitable for hiding, and even felt the breath several times. In the end, this guy collected this kind of information. What exactly is this guy's Nen? Thinking about this, Crollo stared at Huang Quan coldly. I don't know how you know, but even if you knew, what would happen? What can I do? After hearing this, Huang Quan's expression gradually became indifferent. He lowered his head slightly and touched the black demon and said softly, Speaking of which, we haven't really fought against each other for so long, right? Crollo. Crollo's expression revealed a cold look. There will be a chance. As the saying goes, it's better to choose the day than to hit it. Pointing the black devil directly at the ground and pointing the blade inward, Huang Quan looked at Crollo with a smile and said, Instead of waiting for unknown opportunities, it is better to decide the outcome now. Of course, judging from your appearance, it is a matter of life and death. It's not a bad idea either. What a disgusting smile. For some reason, whenever he sees a smile on the other person's face, Crollo will feel inexplicably disgusted in his heart. Phew. Resisting the urge to take action at this moment, Crollo said coldly, You don't have to try to provoke me, I won't take action against you today, but you only have 2 choices next. Either stay and become one of the phantoms or take your people and leave. My people. Huang Quan raised his eyebrows, pointed the knife at the spiders who were about to end the battle, and said with a smile, Okay. Since you want to decisively remove the impurities, then as you wish. I would like to see who exactly are the my people you are talking about. As soon as these words came out, a strange color flashed in Crollo's eyes, and he looked at each other with Huang Quan. Even though I already have a high regard for this guy, are all his plans expected by the other party? This is a bit surprising. Tisk. Small-minded, small-minded. Looking directly at Crollo, Huang Quan shook his head slightly, feeling a little inexplicably disappointed. Perhaps his expectations for Crollo were too high, which led to the Crollo's performance not being as exciting as expected after he took off his disguise. After all, thinking like a conspirator is really not suitable for me. Thinking of this, Huang Quan's eyes narrowed slightly, and the state of entanglement around him quietly transformed into absolute. What will happen next? There are only 3 outcomes. 1 splits and leaves. Both survived and left. The 3 left safely. Although they are all leaving, what happens next will determine how many people will be able to walk out of here alive. Whether it's his side or Krollo's side. That's all. The atmosphere was like a condensed rich silence, pinning the two people facing each other in place. As time passes slowly, ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Following the sound of footsteps, Spider's people stepped up from the 4th floor one by one and arrived at the 5th floor. Uvijin, Maki, Franklin, Nobunaga, Pykenoden, Shalnark, Phaeton. There were 7 people in total, none of whom died in the battle. The 4 layers of silent silence have shown what the outcome of the Black Jackal's disciples is at this time. Just this moment, no one is paying attention to this anymore. Maki and others came up. Then they noticed that something unknown to them must have happened between the 2 people holding knives, and at the same time they also realized what kind of huge changes would happen at this moment. In silence, ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta, either heavy, light, subtle, or rough. Until all the footsteps disappeared. Behind Krollo, the figures of Pykenoden, Franklin, Phaeton, Uvijin, and Nobunaga stood quietly. Behind Huang Quan, there are only 2 people, Maki and Shalnark. Unexpected and reasonable. Glancing at Uvijin Nobunaga, who looked embarrassed, Huang Quan turned his head slightly and looked at Shalnark, slightly surprised, and said, "I'm not surprised, Sister Maki, but why don't you go to Krollo?" Facing Quan's straightforward inquiry, Shalnark raised his head slightly and glanced at Krollo and the others, then lowered his head and fiddled with his cell phone, and said calmly, "Measure. You are better than Krollo. If there was only Krollo, I would naturally choose to follow him like everyone else, but your appearance. Let me know that there is not only one way to go in the future. If they are used to being attached to Krollo, I believe that the vast majority will choose you. You and Krollo seem to be very similar in terms of size, talent, strength, and obvious leader individualism, but based on my observations during this period, I can detect that you are fundamentally different. Is that true? I hope I won't disappoint you." Huang Quan smiled after hearing this and turned to look at Ma Chi, who looked slightly cold. "Aren't you going to think about it, Sister Maki? You are my brother." With a simple response, Maki remained silent and stared calmly at Uvijin Nobunaga on the other side, with a hint of complexity flashing in his eyes. Maybe she didn't expect it either. The first act of becoming a nin person created such a divisive situation. It's really surprising. Call out. At this time, the other side. Krollo's right hand appeared out of thin air, and his cold gaze swept over Maki and Shalnark, paused slightly, and then stared firmly at Huang Quan. "It's a bit unexpected. I didn't expect Shalnark, who has always been calm, to choose you." "I'm not surprised." Seeing this, Huang Quan looked at Uvijin and others, sighed and smiled slightly. "The reason why you broke out in advance is just to see that if you give me some time, Uvijin, Nobunaga and others will be completely absorbed by me before they form a brigade, right? I thought you would keep pretending, but you can't hold it anymore. I really have a high opinion of this situation. If we go by what Shalnark said just now, the measurement should be more appropriate. I believe you can understand what it means. A useless war of words." Krollo stared at Huang Quan and others coldly. "The Black Jackal has been destroyed. I declare that the Phantom Troop has been established. Brigade members Parker Notan, Franklin, Phaeton, Uvijin, Nobunaga. I am the temporary leader. Does anyone disagree?" "Agree." XN. Behind him, 5 jagged voices sounded. "It's your turn, Izumi." Staring at Huang Quan and the other 3, Krollo's eyes revealed an unmeltable coldness, and he spoke coldly as if he could not allow others to refute. "Join and become a member of Phantom. Or choose to leave, or want to become the enemy of Phantom." "Ha ha ha, it's really interesting. Is this a threat?" Turning his left hand slightly, the Devil's Gate appeared. The smile on Huang Quan's face gradually faded, and the previous indifference appeared instead. "Let me join Phantom and work under you. You know this is impossible. You and I can't predict what the future will bring. As for whether we will become enemies." Having said this, Huang Quan paused slightly, then raised the corners of his fair mouth slightly and looked at Krollo and the others. "Then it depends on your performance, Phantom Troop." As soon as these words came out, suddenly, the originally solid atmosphere became more solid. Although the veins in the right hand holding the thief's ultimate were slightly bulging, and Krollo's eyes were getting colder, he never lost his composure and left the other party's instructions. This is not out of consideration for the friendship between Maki and others. But he was afraid of Huang Quan's unknown Nen. He would not take action now without thoroughly ascertaining the opponent's abilities. After all, Nen by Parker Notan et al. Has not yet been developed. Moreover, rather than getting rid of the opponent directly, I am more interested in the opponent's cold ability. Opposite side. Didn't this happen? Testing Krollo with provocative words, but seeing that he still showed no sign of taking action, Huang Quan shook his head slightly, waved his hand, and walked towards the stairs on the right with Maki and Shalnark. Just as Krollo was afraid of him, he was also very afraid of the other person. In the past 3 months, he has tested the other party hundreds of thousands of times, trying to find out what kind of plundered Nen the other party has in the thief's ultimate intention at the moment. As a result, Krollo was more vigilant than he thought, and no matter what kind of abilities he had, he kept them as tightly hidden as a hamster. Not even anyone else among the spiders knew. Despair. While the two sides were crossing each other, Huang Quan turned his head to look at Krollo and said with a smile, "Are you sure you don't want to take action now? There may not be such a good opportunity in the future." One day, Krollo came with a cold gaze. "You will die due to your arrogance." Quan. Really? Then I'm really looking forward to it. Hearing this, Huang Quan smiled nonchalantly and continued walking toward the stairs with Maki Shalnark. At the same time, he waved his hand without looking back and said, "I have struggled through death. Do you think I will still be afraid of death? When you relive your life, of course you have to live more comfortably. Wouldn't it be more interesting? By the way, I haven't congratulated you on establishing the Phantom Troop and successfully becoming the leader. I won't give you any gifts. I'll just give you a rival. Since you call yourselves Phantom, then it would be too petty for me to name it reality, so. God of Death. This will be the code name of our brigade in the future. Let me see. Can the Phantom Troop led by you survive to the Dark Continent?" Dark Continent. Looking at the backs of Huang Quan and others, Krollo's cold eyes flashed with doubt. What is this place? Why did Quan say whether he could survive? What is the underlying meaning of this sentence? The last short sentence caused Krollo to have many doubts in his heart. Captain Kuro. Next to him, Pike Notan watched Huang Quan and the others disappear at the top of the stairs, with a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. Are you really going to let them go like this? Listening to what he means, it seems that he will definitely become our enemy. It's not the right time yet. Krollo's cold expression turned calm. He glanced around and said calmly, "If you really want to keep Quan, everyone here today, including me, may die. Your sacrifice will be meaningless before his identity is found out. Next, let's formulate the rules of Phantom Troop, and those who have different opinions can put forward their own opinions." Not far away, Uvajin and Nobunaga looked at each other in silence. Although they had seen Izumi open Nen before they came, after hesitating for a while after recalling the memories of getting along with each other, for some reason, they did not tell Krollo this information in the end. 3-story stairwell. Spring. Maki, who was following behind, asked with some confusion, "Did you just say that because you wanted to take action against them?" Huang Quan's eyes were calm and he smiled slightly. "It's just that Krollo is more tolerant than I thought. No matter how I tried to provoke him, he showed no sign of taking action." Why? Maki wondered. It's obvious that their numbers have a huge advantage. At this moment, Maki has directly separated his relationship with the spider. For her, since they can't become companions, the friendship between them will naturally dissipate. Even Uvajin and Nobunaga, Nyen and Nyen, are sometimes different. On the back right side, Shalnark looked at his phone without raising his head and explained, "After all, we have been practicing reading for less than 3 months. Judging from the strength of Captain Quan and Krollo, if there is a life and death fight, Phaeton Franklin and I will all die. And this death is precisely the most meaningless. One more thing, the reason why the leader wants to take action against Krollo is just to take advantage of this opportunity to kill him and take over the entire Phantom." Bang 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 wide. Applause suddenly sounded. "Shalnark, you are even better than I expected." After applauding softly, Huang Quan smiled slightly and put his hands into the pockets of his windbreaker again. What a pity. Crollo also thought of this, so he kept triggering it but not. The reason is simply that he can't figure out what my strength is and what my command ability is. Ha! Hearing this, Maki reacted and said solemnly, but your nen has been seen by Uvajin Nobunaga. In this case, Crollo and the others should take action soon, right? Won't. Huang Quan laughed and shook his head, saying, at least not today. Maki thought for a moment and suddenly said, you mean, Daojin and Nobunaga will not disclose your information to Crollo? Reverse calculation. Shalnark turned his head and looked behind him, and said calmly, during the time we came down, if Uvajin Nobunaga really leaked information to Crollo, he might have been chasing him. There's just one thing I still can't figure out. Captain, since you knew from the beginning that Uvajin and Nobunaga wouldn't choose you, why did you still show your nen in front of them? This is equivalent to adding a lot of variables and risks to yourself. It's just a test. When he reached the second floor, Huang Quan's pace suddenly slowed down a lot for no apparent reason, and his whole body began to be wrapped with black and white qi, forming a thin but hard armor. Seeing this situation, Maki and Shalnark instantly became vigilant, and the qi in their bodies suddenly burst out, forming a defensive posture with Tangle. At this time, Maki quickly looked around and asked with a vigilant look, what happened? No problem. Waving his hand, Huang Quan walked slowly towards the first floor, looking calmly at Hisoka, a red-haired boy standing against the wall at the door of the first floor. Why, can't you help but want to take action now? Hisoka. Back again. You really know me. Odin. Looking at Huang Quan with interest, Hisoka's mouth curved into an exaggerated smile like a clown. No. Your real name should be Quankai. Obviously, everything that happened in the Black Jackal building was caught in Hisoka's eyes. You are very famous in West Street. Regarding his name being known by the other party, Huang Quan's expression did not change. He looked at the other party's exaggerated expression and said calmly, being called the magician in the alley. In addition, there are clowns and puppet masters. You investigated it very clearly. Listening to the familiar names popping up from Huang Quan's mouth, Hisoka's expression remained unchanged and he smiled like a clown. It's really amazing. You are the first to guess that I play all these roles. Have you been fascinated by me since the first time we met? I am indeed quite interested in you. In the surprised expressions of Maki and Shalnark, Huang Quan walked to Hisoka and stopped, slowly stretched out his right hand, smiled slightly and said, since you know my name, you must have witnessed everything just now. How's it going? Are you interested in joining my Reaper? Suddenly, facing the sudden invitation from the other party, Hisoka was slightly stunned, and her exaggerated smile turned into a calm look in an instant. Why did you invite me suddenly? I thought you wouldn't be the kind of person who needs a reason. Huang Quan smiled, still maintaining the posture of his right hand, and said, but since you asked, I have nothing to hide. From the first moment I saw you, I can be sure that your talent in reading is even better than Crollo's. Every time I see you, you are killing. If I guess correctly, you are looking for a satisfactory and suitable opponent, right? Oh. Upon hearing this, Hisoka's pupils suddenly condensed slightly, and his body tensed up instantly, but the expression on his face remained calm. Are you so sure of your guess? No need to be vigilant. Seeing this, Huang Quan smiled slightly, took back his right hand without caring, and said slowly, the killing tonight is enough, I am a little tired. As for my invitation, you don't need to answer immediately. Of course, if we meet next time, I hope to receive your response. If you don't want to fight, just stop here today. After saying that, Huang Quan nodded to Hisoka with a smile, and walked towards the door with a slightly wary Maki Shalnark. Etc. At this time, Hisoka pulled his right hand slightly, and from the shadow corner in the distance, a round object suddenly flew out and landed heavily in front of Huang Quan and others. Looking at the wretched-looking head in front of him, his eyes twisted with fear, Huang Quan turned his head and looked at Hisoka quietly. What's the meaning? This is a meeting gift that satisfies me. The exaggerated clown smile appeared on Hisoka's face again. But the conversation that you have always dominated makes me very unhappy. How can you be sure that I won't join the phantom formed with that Crollo? Because you are not a person who can endure loneliness. Walking towards the outside, Huang Quan said without looking back, Besides, what if you join Krollo's phantom troop? It's just one more enemy. Given Krollo's narrow layout, phantom troop's upper limit was fixed from the very beginning. I believe that with your warlike personality, you will definitely have a lonely day. When that time comes, the only one who can become your target is me. He is really a conceited and arrogant guy. Looking at Huang Quan's disappearing back, Krollo's slender eyes gradually narrowed. I'm becoming more and more interested in you, Quan. While muttering to himself, Hisoka's figure disappeared in the shadow. Also disappearing together are the pink air lines stuck to various places on the first floor. Only visible lines are. That guy named Hisoka is very evil. Walking in the dark alley, Shalnark said calmly, and it gives me a very dangerous feeling. Are you sure you want to invite him to join? Leader. You must be able to tell that that guy is not someone who can be controlled at will. Hearing this, Huang Quan smiled and said, but your feeling is indeed very accurate. If you look at the degree of danger, Hisoka is indeed a very dangerous guy. It's just that I'm not as small as Krollo. Although I don't like to be inferior to others, I really like the sense of urgency and pursuit. I hope that in the future, God of Death, someone with talents far surpassing me will appear. Only in this way can I absorb all the nutrients and become stronger continuously. For me, no matter what I do, I have to be the best in the world. Even the brigade is no exception. It seems, Shalnark understood the underlying meaning of Huang Quan's words and said, the leader still regrets Uvajin's choice. Yes, Huang Quan looked up at the bright starry sky and said softly, obviously they are all talents with extreme qualifications. If they follow Krollo's brutal growth, in the end, at most they can only become talents or ordinary extreme bar. Extremely talented, qualified, Shalnark and Maki seemed to understand, thinking that Quan was commenting on their talents or something. Suddenly, Maki seemed to remember something, looked at Huang Quan and said in a daze. Izumi, is Shizuku still at your place? I'm afraid she doesn't know what happened. Shizuku. Huang Quan was stunned when he heard this, patted his forehead and said with a smile, if you hadn't mentioned it, I would have really forgotten about this little girl. Yes, since everyone has made a choice, she is no exception. The words were not spoken. The pure white and emerald green patterned Devil's Gate appeared out of thin air in his left hand, and he tapped his white fingertips in the void. The transparent long door opened quietly in the air. Crunch. Gently opening the door, Huang Quan stretched out his hand in an elegant manner and said, please, you two, the battle at night is so hard, how about you go in and take a rest? Mysterious. Maki rolled his eyes, walked directly in, and disappeared into the air. Aren't you worried about being exposed, Captain? Shalnark looked at the air door and said meaningfully, if I were an undercover agent arranged by Krollo, the leader's nen would be exposed. Be trustworthy when employing people. Huang Quan smiled, pressed Shalnark's shoulder, and walked towards the air gate. My capacity is not that small. Since you have chosen me, I will naturally repay you with the same level of responsibility. Besides, if my nen can be seen through by others so easily, then I will have to abdicate the position of leader. Chat room. The two of them joined the air door one after another, and the door from the outside world disappeared instantly. However, Maki and Shalnark, who entered the different space at this moment, were already frozen in place. Looking at the 360-degree high-definition visible 100-meter space in front of them, for a moment, neither of them knew what kind of expression they should use to express their mood at this time. Shalnark looked at everything clearly outside and couldn't help being shocked and said, what a terrifying ability. Just at the first sight, the concepts of intelligence collection, target assassination, mobile operations and other related aspects have already appeared repeatedly in my mind. There is food and drink available, you can do whatever you want. Pointing to several sets of sofas and some food and snacks placed in the center of the space, Huang Quan smiled and turned to look at the small figure curled up on the sofa on the right with a low expression. Shizuku. Before Huang Quan could speak, Maki, who had come to his senses next to him, walked quickly to Shizuku's side and caressed him with a slight worry, regardless of being shocked by this magical space. Are you okay? After a long silence, Shizuku looked downcast and hugged his knees, and said softly, Sister Maki, I saw everything just now. Is everyone really separated like this? Everything was fine before I came here. It's inevitable, Shizuku. At this time, Shalnark picked up the rye drink beside the table, sat directly on the sofa on the left, drank the rye drink and said lazily. There is no room for two tigers in one mountain. Neither the leader nor Crollo are the kind of people who can do things under others. Their individualistic temperament is too obvious. Even if you are forced to blend in together, something will happen sooner or later. What do you think about it? Since the visibility in this space is so clear, you must have witnessed everything just now. You who have struggled to survive with us know very well the cruel reality of Meteor Street. Life without shelter often means bullying, disappearance, trafficking, or the simplest death. So, choose decisively. Even if you choose Crollo's side, the leader will not do anything to you. Speaking of this, Shalnark couldn't help but look at Huang Quan, who was sitting on the sofa in the middle, and Maki and Shizuku also looked over. Captain, why are you looking at me like that? Seeing this, Huang Quan couldn't help but laugh and shook his head, saying, you don't think I don't even have this kind of respect, do you? Don't worry, no matter what, Shizuku calls me brother. Even if you become an enemy in the future, I will try my best not to kill you. Of course, if you must deal with me, you can't blame me for being ruthless. Hear this. The expressions of everyone present did not change. Even Shizuku has no fear of death. The reason why her mood was so low was simply because she was afraid of the loneliness she once felt when she was alone. As for choosing to leave or stay, I want to stay. Without the slightest hesitation, Shizuku's unpolluted clear black and white eyes stared intently at Huang Quan. Brother Quan, leader, can I stay? Of course it's no problem. Hearing this, Huang Quan said slightly dumbly, don't you think about it more. Crollo's phantom troop accounts for the majority of people. You are different. Although he is the youngest and is prone to forgetfulness, Shizuku's thinking has become extremely calm and clear at this time. If I choose to join Crollo's side, they will definitely ask me where I went before. With Uvajin and Nobunaga here, and with Crollo's keen insight, the secrets of this space will definitely be exposed. Besides, I haven't awakened my thoughts yet. Even if I go there, I will definitely be positioned as a reserve member. It will take at least a few years before I can actually join. In addition, I am easily forgetful. If I cannot develop abilities suitable for them, with Crollo's personality, I will be gradually abandoned. So, speaking of this, Shizuku looked at Huang Quan firmly. Let me awaken, reading, leader. Although I know that with your character, you will not abandon me, but I want to become more valuable. Only by awakening mind can I have the power to choose. I'm already 3 months behind. I don't want to continue to lag behind, even if I end up like you said, drying up and dying. Wow, hearing this, Maki and Shalnark couldn't help but look at Shizuku in amazement. Unexpectedly, Shizuku, who usually seems confused and forgetful, would be so rational and decisive deep down. To be honest, the other party's performance at this moment really made the two of them stunned. It is indeed not easy to occupy a place in the phantom of the future. Even though she is only 7 to 8 years old now. He lowered his head slightly and stared at Shizuku. After thinking for a moment, Huang Quan turned on condensation and stared at Shizuku for a while. Finally, he nodded slowly and said with a smile. As you wish. Really. Hearing the response, Shizuku looked surprised, and his low mood was instantly wiped away. Did you really agree? The biggest torment for her during this period of time was that other people were growing all the time, but she was the only one who stood still and stagnated. The anxiety, impatience, and suffering were really extremely painful. Even if she is born with forgetfulness, this anxiety will linger and be unforgettable. Hearing Huang Quan's reply at this moment was like being hit by a huge brown sugar, full of surprises. Spring. Maki looked at Shizuku's excited expression, walked to Huang Quan and whispered worriedly, didn't you tell Crollo before that Shizuku at this age has an unstable mind and is prone to accidents? Why did you suddenly agree to wake her up now? Because her qualifications are better than we imagined. Using condensation to look at the gradually thinning and thickening life energy on Shizuku's body, Huang Quan smiled slightly and said, in her current state, it is enough to awaken Nian. Even if it's nothing more than being restrained into qi for a while, I can at least hold on for a while. Besides, I also want to see if her will is as calm and strong as she appears at the moment. Aside, Shalnark, who was drinking a rye drink, lowered his head and fiddled with his cell phone without saying anything else. It was as if he chose Quan as the leader. Since the other party chose to do this, he naturally chose to trust the judgment of the leader. Even though the final result may be unsatisfactory. At the edge of different spaces. At this time, two figures, one large and one small, were standing opposite each other. Not far away, Maki was sitting on the sofa, looking here hesitantly. Is it really okay? Shizuku is still so young. Don't treat her like a child. Shalnark lowered his head to disassemble and assemble the mobile phone, and said calmly without raising his head, "You should know that as those of us who were born in Meteor Street, we have never lived a day like children. Between her and us, apart from the age difference, there is no other difference. And in my opinion, the fact that the leader can give her this opportunity is already the luckiest opportunity among the millions of children in Meteor Street. Everyone has been living together for a few years." Maki's expression returned to calmness. He glared at Shalnark fiercely, then turned to look at Izumi and Shizuku. Tisk. Feeling the change in Maki's expression, Shalnark shrugged, stopped what he was doing, and looked up. It just so happened. A black and white chi was directly driven into Shizuku's body by Huang Quan, and all the chi channels and aura nodes in his body were penetrated and opened. The next moment, coax, like a kettle boiling violently, a large amount of life energy surged out of Shizuku's body like boiling steam. This is a sign that the aura nodes of the whole body are wide open, and that life energy is tilting outward uncontrollably from all parts of the body. Clearly feeling the constant flow of life energy from his body, Shizuku couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise, but his small face seemed to be very interesting. "Captain, this is your chi. It's like there are countless transparent bugs coming out of your body. Concentrate and follow my instructions." Seeing Shizuku's cute little face tightening and nodding quickly, Huang Quan smiled and his expression turned calm. "First, while keeping your body steady, close your eyes." Hearing this, Shizuku closed his eyelids obediently. After carefully reviewing the plan in his mind, Huang Quan said calmly, "Imagine that life energy bursting out from your body, that is, this water vapor-like chi coming from top to bottom like your own blood. Circular flow." Whether it's a clockwise cycle or a counterclockwise cycle, follow your own best imagination, until the corresponding picture emerges in your mind. Through the influence of imagination and will, the speed of chi circulation is slowed down little by little until chi completely stops. Finally, a thick chi model is formed around the body, which can be walls, human figures, dolls, trees, etc., or even everything you are most familiar with. The simplest one is the wall. Choose it and imagine it wrapped around the surface of the body. This is the most basic tangle in the application of Nien. That's all. With Huang Quan's detailed explanation, Shizuku, who originally had many thoughts, gradually became able to concentrate with his will. Then, according to the method taught by Quan, through imagination, the chi will be circulated from top to bottom until it completely stagnates. Then imagine chi as your favorite brown sugar, winding and fixing it around the body bit by bit, and finally turning into a transparent and uneven tangle. See this. A smile appeared on Huang Quan's face and he said softly, "You can open your eyes now, Shizuku." Perhaps it was due to the relationship developed in Meteor Street. The other party's qualifications, character, and even will were better than he expected. Worthy of being one of the future Phantom Troop members. But do we still want to push Shizuku to develop Nan-like protruding eye fish? Thinking of this, there was a look of thought in Huang Quan's eyes. Slowly opening his eyes, Shizuku looked at the chi around him that looked like transparent armor, and felt the sense of power coming from his body, and couldn't help but be surprised. "Captain, is this Nien? I really feel like I have become a lot stronger. This can only be considered chi, not Nien." After coming back to his senses, Huang Quan reached out and rubbed Shizuku's little head, and led her towards Maki Shalnark. Not long after, when Huang Quan sat down, the three people's eyes focused on her. "DTB, anything you want to ask?" Picking up a glass of rye drink from the table, Huang Quan took a sip and smiled slightly. "Today happens to be the day when death was established. I will try my best to answer what I can." As soon as these words came out, Shalnark, Maki, and Shizuku looked at each other in confusion. Finally, "I'll do it first." Shalnark on the left thought for a moment and then calmly spoke, "You sir. Are you sure our code name is Death and you won't change it?" Quote. Manipulating chi to change the bean balls of different sizes on his fingertips, Huang Quan nodded and smiled. Since Crollo and the others have already released the words, it would be too boring to change them again. Clear. After confirming the code name, Shalnark nodded calmly and said, "Then the second point is, should we formulate the marks and rules of the brigade now? There is no circle without rules. Even if we have a small number of members now, it is best to set the most basic rules for the brigade first." Same idea as mine. Huang Quan turned his head and looked at Maki and Shizuku, asking, "What do you think?" "Very reasonable." Maki nodded coldly and said, "We still have too few members now. Do you have any suitable goals?" "Quan, leader. I have no objection." At this moment, Shizuku was still studying the chi on his body curiously, and responded casually. "Then let's make the rules first." After thinking for a while, Huang Quan said calmly, "First of all, the first rule is that the number of Death God members is not fixed for the time being. As long as they are recommended by 2 or more members, they can join directly after the group leader confirms their talents. In addition, once a group member dies or there is a shortage of members, the group leader can directly find and identify new group members. Do you have any opinions? Isn't the quantity fixed?" Shalnark frowned and said, "In this way, won't the Reaper become more and more crowded in the future? This will be discussed at that time." Huang Quan looked at the crowd and said calmly, "Do you have any other opinions about the member recommendation system and the group leader selection system?" Qian Zhao. "Agree." Maki nodded and said, "I thought you would make a rule where killing one person can replace joining the group, but I didn't expect it would be a recommendation system with no limit on the number of people. The scapegoat rule is the most meaningless thing." Huang Quan smiled slightly and said, "My goal is the Dark Continent. I will try my best to collect all qualified Nin people. That is what I want. The cabinet. Dark Continent." Shalnark was a little confused when he heard this. "What on earth is this place? You seem to have mentioned this place name before at Crollo's place. It is a place full of mystery, disaster and hope." Speaking of this, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with passion, which quickly disappeared, and he smiled and said, "It's not the time for you to know yet. When you and I grow up, I will tell you." "Well, I understand." Shalnark nodded and said, "Then the next question. Can members of the group kill each other? How should we deal with disagreements?" "Well, this should really be a priority." After hearing this question, a series of thoughts came to Huang Quan's mind, including the method of throwing spider coins to resolve differences in Phantom Troop. Think for a while. Looking at the crowd, Huang Quan said calmly, "Members are not allowed to kill each other. Anyone who is invited to join Death God in the future must trust each other and not be suspicious. So, when you invite members in the future, you must know whether the other party can be trusted by everyone. If there is a conflict of opinion between members, the decision will be made by the group leader when the group leader is present, and when only the members are present, the decision will be made. Guess let's decide." Mora, Shalnark, Maki and Shizuku all looked shocked. "Isn't this too childish?" "Yeah, I always feel like the God of Death's style has suddenly fallen off. How about changing it to something else, such as coin tossing, arm wrestling, etc.? Don't underestimate guessing." Seeing everyone's astonishment, Huang Quan smiled and said, "If I guess correctly, Crollo and the others will use coin throwing to resolve the conflict." "What, do you want to be like him?" Quote. Shalnark shook his head and hesitated, "But is it too childish to use guessing to solve the problem? I still think it is easier for members to vent their anger with arm wrestling and the like." "When do you think a conflict of opinions will occur?" Huang Quan said calmly, "Only when dealing with a certain matter or task, you will have differences of opinion on the matter. The more this happens, the more decisive it is to make a decision. The most timely, effective, and convenient method is guessing. As for the number of guessing, it is based on one time, and the result cannot be changed. Do you still have any opinions?" Hearing this, all three of them were stunned. Indeed, when they can disagree, it is often at certain urgent or important moments, and at such times there is no time for them to engage in arm wrestling or the like. In this way, timely methods such as guessing or throwing coins are indeed effective ways to resolve conflicts between members. Think of this. Maki nodded. I agree. Agree. I agree. Seeing the three people nodding in agreement, Huang Quan smiled slightly and said, then let me set the last rule directly. Just when Shalnark and others heard and were confused. Huang Quan looked calm and said calmly, since death has been established and I am the first leader, I naturally have to be responsible for everyone. Whether it is you or the members who join in the future, you must keep one thing in mind. That is, the god of death's survival is more important than the leader's life. Once I or any future leader dies, the most outstanding member among the members will succeed to the position of leader. Do you have any objections? As soon as these words came out, for a moment, the three people present fell silent. They know the meaning of this rule, and they also know that this is indeed the most sensible rule for the god of death. The existence of a team is indeed inseparable from these rules. And they became so silent, and they didn't expect Quan to be so decisive in setting such rules that were not beneficial to them. Since no one objects, let's decide. Seeing the natural silence, Huang Quan shook his head slightly and said without any room for refutation, the basic rules have been set. When you want to recommend members in the future, you must also inform them of the rules. Even if those who cannot accept it join, they are just impurities in the turbidity. As for whether other rules will be needed, we will discuss and formulate them in the future when there are more people. I see. After coming back to his senses, Shalnark gave Huang Quan a complicated look. Captain, the only thing that remains is whether the symbol of the god of death has been established. Or is it just random? The logo can increase the cohesion of the brigade, so naturally it should be decided first. Huang Quan leaned back on the sofa behind him, looked around at everyone and smiled slightly. Do you have any ideas? For example, unified tattoos, accessories, equipment or weapons. How about the accessories? Shizuku, who had been silent all this time, his eyes flashed and said, Captain, Commander. I want a ring, a big and beautiful ring, CCEC. It'd be better if it's like the one in the comic book, with the code name engraved on the ring. That's really cool. Cough. He stretched out his hand to cover Shizuku's mouth that couldn't stop. Maki's cold cheeks were a little red, and he seemed to be embarrassed and said, I'm pretty good at needlework. If you choose to get a tattoo, I can do it. I have no objection. Shalnark lowered his head, fiddled with his phone and said, but both of their ideas are pretty good. I think we can adopt them together. For example, using tattoos to determine the numerical ranking of members, using rings to determine code names, etc. The specifics still have to be decided by the group leader. After listening to everyone's opinions and thinking for a moment, Huang Quan took out the black demon from his left hand of the windbreaker and reorganized it into the dragon's tail-biting form of jet black fragments. It's like an Ouroboros, but it's a jet black sword dragon made of blades, and the blade dragon's head just connects to the black jade handle. From the appearance, it reveals the mystery of the dragon's chamber energy and the blade is extremely sharp. Let's use this as the symbol of the god of death. Handing the dragon-shaped black demon to Maki, Huang Quan smiled and said, Black demon blade has 99 fragments, and the handle is exactly 100, how about? Is it difficult to tattoo Dark Devil on every member who joins death? After taking the black demon and observing it carefully, Maki said, no problem, I originally thought I would get a spider tattoo, so I specially trained. This is much simpler than spiders, but it is still difficult to express the sharpness of Dark Demon. Just do your best. Huang Quan looked at Maki in surprise and said with a smile, I didn't expect you to have such tattoo skills, Sister Maki. In that case, then feel free to tattoo the brigade number on the center of Dagger Dragon. For example, for me, I would choose 0 as my death number. The rest of the numbers derived from this are up to you to choose. Once the tattoo is determined, there will be no chance to change it. I choose number 1. Maki looked at Huang Quan and said softly, no matter what happens, I will definitely book this number 1. Then I'll choose number 6. Shalnark next to him raised his head and looked at it, and said casually, Anyway, the number of members is not limited for the time being, and I feel that number 6 is very compatible with me. Then I want number 8. Picking up a piece of chewing gum from the table, Shizuku chewed it with a puffed face and said, I especially like number 8. Maki must give me a more beautiful tattoo. No problem. After twisting Shizuku's head, a smile appeared on Maki's cold face. I will definitely make it very beautiful for you. The location of the tattoo is not fixed. You can choose a location that is convenient for you, right? After thinking about it, Huang Quan stretched out his hand in the void and clicked lightly. In an instant, the door, similar to clothes, appeared in midair. Then, he covered the clothes-shaped door with the black energy in the black and white chi, making it look more like a slender piece of black clothing. Sister Maki, concentrate your chi on your eyes and see if you can make this death domination outfit. Chi condenses in the eyes. Hearing this, Maki was a little confused and asked, does this have any special effect? However, despite her doubts, she still followed the method taught by Huang Quan and barely covered her eyes with chi. This is Lien's advanced skill condensation, and it can also be regarded as one of the advanced application skills of Nien. Understanding the other party's doubts, Huang Quan explained, although in normal combat or practice, when others release a large amount of chi, those who have awakened Nien can use R. But among the many advanced application techniques of Nien, there is an application technique called Hidden, which is an extremely advanced application technique. It can be said that once the opponent uses Hidden to hide his or her own chi, then only using condensation can observe the chi that has been hidden. And those who observe with naked eyes will often unknowingly being attacked by the enemy's hidden thought energy. Just like this moment, before he finished speaking, Huang Quan, who covered the clothes-shaped air door with black energy, used Hidden to eliminate the presence of the black energy with a slight movement of his mind. How can it still be like this? Seeing this situation, not only Maki, but also Shalnark Shizuku couldn't help but look shocked, and subconsciously wanted to cover his eyes with chi, forming a condensation. However, compared to Shalnark and Maki, who have 3 months of training, Shizuku has just begun to awaken mind after all. No matter how hard she tries, her control of chi is too weak. As for Maki and Shalnark's first condensation, they could barely hold on for a while. Although they were not skilled in manipulation, they could still use it. Good. Shutting back and forth between Yin, Huang Quan looked at the three of them and smiled slightly. In addition to condensation and Yin, the advanced application skills include Zhou, Yuan, Jian, hard ideographic, flow. If you want to become the world's top Nen, and be qualified to go to the mysterious dark continent with me in the future, you must master these skills skillfully, do you understand? In the next month, I will hand over all the application skills I know to you. As for how far you can achieve it, you can only see yourself. Advanced application skills of Nien. Seeing this, Shalnark was slightly impressed and said, no wonder the leader's strength is so much higher than ours. It turns out that there are so many unknown skills in Nien. It seems that the team leader didn't reveal it to us before because he wanted to see how many of us would choose you, right? This is just one aspect. Huang Quan smiled when he heard this. The most important thing is that these application techniques were developed by me based on incomplete information. The specific effects are the same as real advanced application techniques and have yet to be verified in the future. Besides, I never like to do things to support the enemy. Then Krolos sighed. At this time, Maki wondered, are there such advanced application skills? This possibility cannot be ruled out. Huang Quan thought, but what is certain is that even if you know some advanced application skills, they must be incomplete. At least before Pike Notan's Nen was developed, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to get all the advanced application skills. Speaking of which, can the Death Tyrant outfit I showed you be tailor-made? At this moment, Huang Quan's right hand tapped the front, and was infected by the black energy. It was like the slim-fitting death armor version door that Kurosaki Ichigo wore when swastika, standing quietly in the void. Low-key, mysterious, domineering, handsome. Well, it should be fine. Taking a closer look, Maki nodded and said, if it's just ordinary materials, it will take a certain amount of time to complete, but if you want to use special materials, I haven't tried it yet. Do not worry. After closing the door, Huang Quan once again fixed the Captain Yori in the Shinigami in the form of a door in the void, and then rendered it with the white air in the black and white air, while the black air formed the 0 number behind it. Also, let's record this feather original windbreaker for now. When the Death God reaches 13 people in the future, they will use this as the unified clothing of the brigade. 13 people. Shalnark glanced at the clothing door curiously and asked doubtfully, Captain, didn't you say that the number of members is not fixed? Why is it the number 13? You first look at our ages. Pointing at the 3 people and himself, Huang Quan said with a smile, by the time we reach 13 people, it will have been several or 10 years, right? Wait until then, when the regiment will be in heaven. Really cool. Upon hearing this unfamiliar word, Shalnark and others looked confused, with confusion in their eyes. To be honest, they didn't understand what the leader was thinking. But no matter what, the establishment of code names, rules and symbols did make the hearts of the 3 Shalnark people gradually settle down. After all, although the previous separation with Krollo and others was fine, there was always an inexplicable sadness lingering in my heart. Captain, after thinking about it, Shalnark hesitated and said, if I can convince Uvajin and the others, can I accept them? It's best to be able to convince nature. Speaking of this, Huang Quan smiled meaningfully. But, with Krollo's character, he won't leave us with a weakness to poach people. No need to guess, this guy is probably hurriedly making rules for everyone, and by the way, he decided to designate Phantom's symbol as spider. 100 shots and 100 shots. Maki said with a smile in his eyes. Krollo asked me before about what I would think if I had a spider as a brigade tattoo. Me too, Shalnark shrugged and said. From the moment he asked this question, I already knew very well that he would never give up the position of captain to you. By the way, leader. Shalnark's eyes narrowed slightly. What exactly are you and Krollo going to do in 1 month? Ever since you came back from South Street that day, there has been something wrong with each other. Not only me, but others have also felt it. Want to know? Bo. Opening a bottle of rye drink, Huang Quan took a sip, looked at everyone and smiled slightly. It's very simple, we want to cooperate, the mountain guardian beast will be solved. What? As soon as these words came out, everyone present looked shocked. Mountain beast, Shang beast, its elder Flip from Nanchang district. Why was he targeted? He. Huang Quan pressed his hand, comforted him, and said with a smile, don't be so surprised. This is the goal we selected after coming back from South Street. Originally it was intended to be the founding ceremony of Phantom Troop, but I didn't expect that Krollo was so small and took the lead in breaking out. What I didn't expect was that besides Sister Maki, you two would also choose me. It's true that plans can't keep up with changes. Then what next? Shalnark thought. There are 2 problems at this stage. First, the split between Death and Phantom will affect the cooperation between the group leader and Krollo. Second, with our strength, can we deal with the mountain beast Chong Yuan? After all, at this stage, we don't even know the elder's strength, power and other information. If we fight in this state, we will face a huge risk of death. It seems that you are very suitable for intelligence gathering, Shalnark. Seeing that the other party grasped the key points so quickly and accurately, Huang Quan nodded, put away his smile and responded calmly. Although the Krollo device is not very good, the current stage of cooperation does not affect the interests of both of us. Therefore, this guy will definitely come to me again, no matter what the name is. After all, neither I nor Krollo will leave the house without a solution if we don't find a way to deal with that guy from Flippo. Chapter 71. Time passes gradually. Dongcheng area. Maki's house was used by Huang Quan and others as a temporary base for the god of death. Although the place is not big, there is a different space in the air gate and the external stronghold is just a place for others to see. Now, in different space, there are only a few days left before the Yukexan auction begins. During this month, in addition to teaching Maki and others some of the many application techniques of systematic mindfulness that he gathered together, Huang Quan also devoted the rest of the time to his own practice. After all, there are too few psychic items that he has access to at this time, especially since they are basically empty this month. There is nothing found in the garbage mountain or the surrounding areas. Therefore, in order to increase the potential chi in the body as much as possible, Huangquan spends most of his time every day practicing Lian. Only in this way can qi be fully consumed to the greatest extent, thereby increasing the duration of practice during recovery and increasing qi volume bit by bit. However, when the qi volume is consumed to the limit, the body will enter a state of exhaustion. Basically, he can only do this in a different space. There is also the control of qi, control of thought, and most importantly, actual combat. Everything is rapidly improving with the passage of time. Besides, it was when the three of them gradually improved their application skills of Nen that they initially developed their own Nen. As for Nen, Huangquan did not interfere too much. He only made some suggestions and let the three people develop it on their own. What suits you is the best. All he can control is to prevent the three of them from taking the wrong direction when they first enter Nen. For example, Maki's thread, Shalnark's mobile phone control, and Shizuku's spatial talent. August 26, 1985. In a different space. At this time, in an area 100 meters away, two figures were quietly confronting each other. Staring at the calm-looking leader opposite him, Shalnark's figure was tense and his calm expression revealed vigilance, and he held the mobile phone transformed into a purple bat demon tightly in his hand. Captain, this time in actual combat, I will use my Nen. In the state of puppet phone, automatic operation mode, I can't control my body. If you get injured, don't blame me. Oh, has this model been developed by you? Huangquan raised his eyebrows when he heard this and asked, have the consciousness issues I suggested before been solved? As expected of a genius in emitter, he developed Nen that suits him in just 1 month. However, if the problem of unconsciousness cannot be solved, this ability will only remain in the hunter world. If you want to survive in a dangerous place like the Dark Continent, those who cannot accurately control themselves often mean death. Part of. Shalnark looked calm and said unabashedly, just as you suggested, leader, when I was developing the automatic operation mode of puppet phone, I already biased my unconscious state towards what you called God's perspective. Quote, in this way, although you still can't control your body, you won't be ignorant. God's perspective. Touching his chin, Huangquan thought for a while and nodded, that's right. Since you can change the unconscious state into a God's perspective, the next step can be to gradually change auto to active Nen, which continuously enhances its own mental energy based on the target enemy, once it can be actively controlled, can indeed be regarded as the world's top Nen characteristics. Well, that's what I thought too. Shalnark slowly pulled out the golden antenna on the right side from the puppet cell phone, then stabbed it into the center of his chest, and said calmly, Captain, I did not hide the penetration of the antenna. You want to wake me up from the automatic operation mode. Before life or death is determined, you can only pull out the golden antenna in my body. Before he finished speaking, the message with the goal of killing Huangquan was formulated in his puppet mobile phone. In an instant, the golden antenna glowed with light after receiving the command. Boom! A large amount of golden chi surged out of Shalnark's body, just like a golden Saiyan, full of violent beauty. At the same time, Shalnark's pupils gradually became hollow, until he turned into a robot, extremely calm and focused on Huangquan in front of him, while his consciousness floated into the sky, forming a third party's God's pain. Although he cannot participate in the battle, he can overlook all the movements on the scene. Come on, Shalnark. Seeing this, the black and white qi in Huangquan's body also burst out, using Lian to release a large amount of qi and using Tang to wrap around the whole body, thus forming a solid jian. Let me see if your Nen can exceed my expectations. In an instant, boom, with Shalnark's target determined, he took the lead like a robot and exploded with one step. The moment he went from stillness to movement, the raging golden thought energy turned into a burning driving force, pushing it towards Huangquan at an extremely fast speed. The distance between the two sides quickly closed. Just before contact, Shalnark in robot form flipped over, and his right foot wrapped with golden thought energy struck straight down from top to bottom like a golden battle axe. The power is good, but the energy is not improved enough. Looking at the golden battle axe falling rapidly above his head, Huangquan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he stepped lightly. Under the influence of the light characteristic of the white air, his figure followed the flowing wind formed when the battle axe fell, like willow catkins. Float backwards and dodge. Bang! The failed golden battle axe hit the ground. However, this is no obstacle to Shalnark in his robot state. Instead, he magically turns the counter-shock force of the landing point into a driving force, causing his own speed to increase without slowing down at all. Speed. Moreover, as time passed, his chi volume did not weaken but doubled, and the chi volume gap between him and Huang Quan also narrowed a lot. And all of this is reflected in Shalnark's consciousness from God's perspective. At this moment, he was looking surprised at his performance in the form of an automatic robot. He did not expect that he could perform such precise fighting skills in this state. Swish, brush, brush. Bang bang bang. As Shalnark's offensive became faster and faster, and his chi became more and more abundant, Huang Quan always maintained a calm demeanor and did not fight back. Instead, he still used his light characteristic to dodge the opponent's attacks like a paper painting. The reason for this is naturally because the opponent's chi volume is still within a controllable range and does not bring enough pressure to him. At the same time, he also wanted to see if this guy's nen had any so-called limits. That's all. As time passes by, until Shalnark's chi capacity completely exceeded his own and brought him enough pressure. Despair. Suddenly, Huang Quan's catkin-like figure sank, as if he had suddenly gained hundreds of kilograms and stagnated in place. To this, Shalnark, who had an expressionless face like a robot, did not hesitate at all. When he saw the enemy's flaw, he made a fist seal entwined with golden thought energy and blasted straight towards Huang Quan's head, hoping to smash it into pieces. Heavy. With his mind whirring, Huang Quan slowly and quickly lifted the palm of his right arm, which weighed 1,000 kilograms and was wrapped in black thought energy, and directly hit Shalnark's violent fist seal in a hard-on mode. Bang! A dull sound suddenly sounded. The next moment, seeing the enemy close to Shalnark, the golden thought energy around his body expanded again, and his body turned into a precise killing machine, using various parts of the body that could be turned into weapons to rapidly attack the enemy's vital parts. Hands, elbows, legs, knees, feet, even teeth, forehead. All parts that could be used as weapons were used by Shalnark in machine form, seemingly without feeling any pain. And the corresponding, it is also the various vital parts of Huang Quan. Eyes, temples, bridge of nose, heart, Adam's apple, ribs, and key points in the center of the lower body. For a moment, the original actual combat training seemed like a real fight. If you were not careful, someone would die on the line of life and death. Bang bang, boom boom boom. The collision and intertwining of black and white energy and golden energy. Raging the surrounding air currents. Facing Shalnark's dangerous attacks from various weird angles, Huang Quan kept a calm expression and controlled the flow of chi from slow to fast during close combat to every key point of defense. For a time, there was a state of anxiety between the two parties. Bang bang bang. About there, feeling Shalnark's body expand again, Huang Quan's eyes narrowed slightly, and his right arm stabbed straight into Shalnark's head like a stabbing sword. At the same time, the condensation condensed and entangled on his right arm turned from black energy to white energy in an instant, and from white energy to black energy in an instant. From this, the mutual switching between light and heavy creates a joint bonus of speed and strength. Call out. Like an afterimage, the 5 fingers of black energy were finally frozen together, and the extremely heavy bombardment hit Shalnark's left arm that he raised instantly. Boom, click, click, click. In an instant, Shalnark's left arm made a cracking sound as if it was about to split. However, under the influence of the strong chi, it did not break directly. Instead, in order to eliminate the heavy attack, the body tilted and fell backwards. Fly away. In an instant, on the defensive. After fighting for so long, it's my turn. Seeing this situation, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with light, and all the black energy covering his body turned into white energy. The lightness characteristic was activated instantly, and his heavy body turned into as light as a feather. With the push of his thoughts, Huang Quan's figure suddenly arrived behind Shalnark, who was flying upside down. He raised his right leg and whipped the opponent's waist fiercely like a whip. In response, Shalnark, who was extremely calm as if in a robot state, instantly made the best choice, using his body's instinct to forcibly twist his body in midair, and concentrated a large amount of golden thought energy on his forearms, forcefully defending Huang Quan's heavy whip kick. Bang! A dull sound suddenly sounded. Amid Huang Quan's ever-changing power and speed, even Shalnark, who had instincts like a robot, couldn't react in time. When his strength estimation was wrong, he was knocked out again. So far, bang 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 bang, accompanied by the sound of rapid attacks. Shalnark, who was in a defensive state in midair, could not stand firmly on the ground once. It was like being surrounded by dozens of people playing football. Every time he was about to release his strength and land, Huang Quan, who appeared in advance, would be pulled into the air again. Seeing this scene, Shalnark's consciousness, which was high in the sky from God's perspective, couldn't help but be speechless. After fighting to this moment, he also clearly understood where his own weaknesses were. With the continuous increase of chi volume and instinctive self-control, it is indeed extremely powerful, but it takes time to accumulate. At least at this stage, with his chi in such a weak state, it would take so long to match the leader's chi. If, before he had accumulated enough, he was killed by an opponent like the leader whose speed and power far surpassed his own, directly attacking his vital points, then everything that followed was meaningless. And, most importantly, in this mode, Shalnark only sees an instinctive balance. Although it is violent and powerful, it lacks the necessary powerful means of killing. Automatic, active, decisive. Thinking of this, Shalnark couldn't help but fall into thinking. Below, bang bang bang, his energy is still rising sharply. Standing still, Huang Quan shook his head slightly, understanding that the battle needed to stop as he looked at Shalnark's body flying backwards towards him again and the surge of golden thought energy around him. If the opponent continues to be so strong, he will really be unable to control the situation. The death of people as a result was not what he wanted to see. Think of this. Looking at Shalnark, who was expressionless in a defensive state, Huang Quan's black and white aura entwined and condensed on the 5 fingers of his right hand, forming black and white finger sleeves. Open the door. Thinking, Huang Quan's eyes narrowed slightly, and with lightning speed, his right hand instantly pointed at Shalnark's defensive left arm in front of Shalnark's chest, and the characteristics of gate were activated instantly. Suddenly, a sliding door made of flesh and bones opened wide as Shalnark approached. Seeing this, Huang Quan didn't hesitate at all. He penetrated the door with his right hand, grasped the golden antenna, and pulled it out directly. Phew! A slight sound of body breaking was heard. As the golden antenna was pulled out, the robot-like Shalnark's empty eyes dimmed instantly, until his main consciousness was forcibly pulled back from high in the air. Those dim eyes that looked like death became bright again. Boom! Exclamation mark. Shalnark, who landed heavily on the ground, screamed in pain and looked resentfully at Huang Quan, who was 1 meter away from him. Captain, you didn't help me even after I pulled out the antenna. This is so heartless. Cough. Don't you know when your state will be lifted? Huang Quan touched his nose, smiled and stretched out his hand to pull it up. But Nen, you are really good. At least with my current strength, I can't test where your limits are. In terms of weaknesses, you should be able to see them clearly, right? Standing up, Shalnark nodded and thought, the time is too long, the initial energy is insufficient, and there is a lack of powerful killing ability. Good. Huang Quan smiled slightly and agreed. Besides that, the most important thing is that you are not proficient in the advanced application of Nian, at least in your automatic control state. I have not seen the use of advanced application skills. Although the attack is decisive, the angle is rough and direct. This shows that your control of Qi has not reached the stage of control. If you want to solve it, only practice makes perfect. Practice until you can integrate it into your instinct. I see. Shalnark shrugged and walked towards the sofa. Captain, why is your Nen so magical? Even my arm covered by Qi was opened directly by you like a door. Nen is so unreasonable sometimes. Walking to the sofa, Huang Quan smiled and was about to sit down. Captain. Suddenly, Maki's voice sounded. Huang Quan looked outside and saw Maki, who had arrived in the bedroom. He was at a fixed position of the sound storage door. He said with a cold expression and a slight solemnity. Crollo is here. It's finally here. Upon hearing these words, the corners of Huang Quan's mouth raised slightly, and he manifested the Devil's Gate and stretched out his hand to open the human form exit beside Maki. In that case, please invite our Phantom Troop leader to come in and have a chat. Okay. Looking at the door that suddenly opened next to him and the sound coming from inside, Maki nodded with surprise, turned around and walked out of the bedroom, heading towards the door. Ta ta ta. Hearing the footsteps, Shizuku, who was guarding the door, turned his head to look at Mei in a cute way. He is still at the door. Should I hide first? Unnecessary. Reaching out to hold the door handle, Maki looked at Shizuku with a smile on his cold expression. Shizuku, you have to remember, you are now a member of the God of Death. No matter what happens, we will protect you. The words just fell. Crunch. The wooden door was opened. Outside the door, a cold-looking Crollo, holding a black and red hardcover book, stared at Maki and Shizuku inside the door, and said without changing his expression, "Please come in." Opening the door, Maki stepped aside and said calmly, "If anything happens, you can talk to our leader directly." Head of the group. Hearing this, Crollo narrowed his eyes slightly, and the God of Death that the other party mentioned a month ago sounded in his mind. He is really an impatient guy. He couldn't wait to form a brigade with just 4 people. Even though Maki and Shalnark were there was no danger at all with this intensity. Interesting and boring. Ta ta ta. While thinking, under the indifferent gazes of Maki and Shizuku, Crollo stepped into the room with a cold expression, looked around the empty and simple room, and finally settled on the slender figure stepping out of the bedroom. Click. The wooden door closed. Glancing at Shalnark in the corner not far away, Crollo stared at Huang Quan's condensed black and white aura, and his cold tone revealed the slightest hint of emotion. "We haven't seen each other for just a short time, and you've become stronger again." Each other. Huang Quan raised his eyebrows when he heard this, and said with a smile, "You have always been so cold-faced, your face will become stiff sooner or later. Listen to my advice. If you are so handsome, smile more, otherwise no girl will like you. I'm not here to talk nonsense with you." Frowning, Crollo said coldly, "I just came to confirm whether the previously agreed cooperation will continue." "Certainly." Huang Quan smiled, narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "There is no problem with me, but you. I am not sure whether there will be a problem. You should know that we have no conflict of interest." Crollo said calmly, "It's just that since we have established a brigade, let's cooperate according to the brigade's method, the cooperation between Phantom and Reaper. As the saying goes, brothers will settle accounts." Hearing this, Huang Quan smiled slightly and said, "How to divide the interests after solving that guy in Flippu? After all, it is a cooperation between the brigade. It can't be in vain, right? You are still as arrogant as ever." Crollo gave Huang Quan a deep look and said coldly, "If we can really solve Flipper, how about a 50-50 share of the subsequent profits? I want 80% of the profit." Looking at Crollo, whose pupils shrank and anger appeared in his eyes, Huang Quan smiled slightly and said, "Of course, the premise is that I give up the distribution of Flip's power. How about that?" "Oh." Crollo heard a trace of surprise in his eyes. "The most important thing about Flip is the power he controls in Nanchung District. Why would this guy give up so easily? Then what do you want?" "Of course it's a nun, an antique, a treasure." Huang Quan smiled, looked at Crollo and said, "What you said before is right, we have no conflict of interest now. I don't care what you want to do after you get the territory, but I'm sorry to tell you that I have no interest in the power territory of Meteor Street at all. What I need now is just a nun that can help us grow properly. What do you think, Crollo? In fact, the nun is just an accessory. What he needs is more collections of antiquities with thoughts attached to them." During this period of time, the air volume increased slowly. The most critical thing is the expansion of thinking capacity. In this month, only Conjurer and Manipulator increased by 1%. This made Huang Quan, who was planning and developing other Nen systems, feel very speechless. "I hope I can gain something in Yushink City." Thinking of this, Huang Quan glanced at Crollo and smiled, "Your answer?" "Agree." After thinking for a while, Crollo nodded and agreed to the cooperation and distribution plan. Although he is not very interested in these territorial forces, it does not mean that the forces in other neighborhoods and cities will not be interested. As long as he controls it properly, he will obtain greater and more benefits. It's gratifying that the cooperation has been achieved. Huang Quan smiled slightly, his expression gradually calmed down and said, "Then, it's time to get down to business. Tell me, For you to come here in person today, something important must have happened. It should be related to Fripp, right? That's right. Krollo glanced at the three Maki people who were standing in three corners. Seeing that Huang Quan had no intention of hiding it, he said directly, before coming, Fripp sent someone here. Who is this nun named Balutu? I don't need to repeat the content of the notice. Stop. Why do I feel so tired every time I chat with you? Huang Quan rolled his eyes and said speechlessly, do you think I am a roundworm in your stomach? Even the content of the other party's notification has to be analyzed by myself. Do you think I can read minds? If you have anything to say, just say it directly. There are no outsiders here except you. Flip wants to see me and you. Not knowing what embarrassment was, Krollo looked at Huang Quan with an increasingly cold expression. There are still 30 minutes left before the time he gave. So anxious to meet. Huang Quan frowned and thought, isn't it clear what the matter is? This is strange, there is still some time before the Yushink City auction starts. Is the other party ready to leave now? Or is there something else going on? The reason is unknown. Krollo shook his head and said, but according to my analysis, it must be directly related to the auction. Otherwise, I wouldn't be allowed to inform you. Have you brought any of your people? Suddenly, a cold light flashed in Huang Quan's eyes, but his expression was still smiling and he said, I suddenly have a bad feeling. What do you think will happen after we go there? Bring it. Krollo subconsciously glanced outside the house and said, what, you want to do it tonight? This is not a good choice. If it is as we predicted, all of Fripp cannot be found and dealt with. Then it will be us who are in danger of death. I'm not that stupid. Huang Quan shook his head with a smile, and said, it's just a precaution. At this stage, I am more cautious about my life. All dangers are still to be hunted in the bud. Once we have a conflict with Fripp, only the disappearance of one side can completely reassure us. I believe you think so too, otherwise you wouldn't have arranged for other members to follow you. Phantom is responsible for the east and south sides of the castle. Seeing Huang Quan's calculation, Krollo said coldly and bluntly, I'll leave the west and north sides to you, is that okay? It's just, if there is no conflict, then stay dormant as long as possible. What I want to deal with is all the Fripps. If you pick any one person, we will be hunted by the forces of Meteor Street all over the world. Don't worry about this. Waving his hand, Huang Quan's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he smiled strangely. If this scene really happened, wouldn't it be very interesting for you? Kill, kill, kill. As long as we kill all the threatening guys in Meteor Street, including Li Hao, then naturally they will no longer be a threat to us. Thoughts arose, and in an instant, the aura mixed with twisted murderous intent completely spread in the room. For a moment, the atmosphere suddenly became silent. Compared to Flip, you are the real threat. After giving Huang Quan a deep look, Krollo slowly turned around and walked out of the house. Quote. We won't know until we get there. Crunch. Use it. After casting a glance at Krollo's back, Maki, Shalnark, and Shizuku turned to look at Huang Quan, waiting for the group leader's instructions. Let's go. Putting away his weird smile, Huang Quan smiled slightly and said, I don't know whether tonight will be interesting or boring, but there is one thing. As someone who has been taught by me personally, you cannot lose to Franklin and the others. Clear. The three of Maki nodded and followed Huang Quan out of the house. In an instant, the figures disappeared into the alleys on the left and right sides. Only two figures of almost the same height, one in front and one behind, walked slowly towards South Street. The sky is gray. There was a hint of turbid smell in the air. Meteor Street, Nanchang District. At the castle. What's different from the last time we arrived is that, this time, the huge iron door was not closed, but opened directly. In the center of the road behind the iron gate, the burly Cass was quietly watching Huang Quan and Huang Quan. Wait until the two of them get close. The elder asked me to greet you too, please come with me. After saying a simple word, Cassis turned around expressionlessly and walked towards the castle. Seeing this, Krollo couldn't help but look at Huang Quan, with a questioning look in his eyes. It seems that I am asking Huang Quan again for the answer. Yeah, calmly, Huang Quan nodded slightly. After getting the answer, Krollo looked at the back of Cass, a trace of inquiry flashed in his eyes. Despair. Huang Quan, who was falling behind, looked at Cass and Crollo with a half-smile on his face. Suddenly, he was looking forward to what kind of movement these two big and small villains would make at the last moment. One is an elder who can climb to the top of Meteor Street. One is to become the world's top thief leader in the future. Different calculations, intelligence gaps, information inequality, power, strength. Tisk tisk tisk. It's really interesting. Thinking of this, the curvature of the corners of Huang Quan's mouth became more and more obvious. Middle side. Crollo, who had been observing Huang Quan, suddenly showed an inexplicable smile and his pupils shrank. It was obvious that for him, the elder's threat could only be regarded as a superficial danger. But what Huang Quan was thinking was something he could never figure out. This hidden threat always made him feel like something was stuck in his throat, making him extremely uncomfortable. This time, gotta find a way to figure out his nen. A glimmer of coldness flashed in Crollo's cold eyes. Only by understanding the other party's abilities can he take the initiative. Ta ta ta, accompanied by footsteps. Not long after, following Cass, Huang Quan, the two of them came to the last hall again. Now, the spacious hall was not filled with many ninja people like last time, but surprisingly there were only 5 people. The fat elder was sitting firmly on the sofa, playing with ancient objects. Behind him were Baruto and 3 other expressionless guards in black. Elder. At this time, Cass, who walked into the room, bent down beside Flip and said respectfully, "People have been brought." Quote. Lifting his head slightly from the antiques he was playing with, the fat Fripp looked at the two of them with narrowed fat eyes like Maitreya Buddha, and said with a smile. 4 months have passed, but the appraisal skills of the two of you have always been engraved in my mind. You're welcome, Elder. Glancing at Huang Quan, seeing that he had no intention of speaking for the time being, Crollo's cold expression turned into a disguised calmness, and asked, "I just don't know why the Elder is so anxious to call us here this time. Sit down and talk." After reaching out and gesturing for the two of them to sit down on the sofa opposite, Flip put down the ancient objects in his hands meaningfully with a smile on his face, and said, "You must have heard about it, right? On the day you left, many of my collections were wiped out by thieves. So, I invited you two here this time to recollect some collections." At this time, Huang Quan, who was sitting on the left, seemed surprised and said, "Elder, what do you mean? The missing collection has not been found yet." "No. Things have been recovered, of course." Waving his hand, Flippu's face showed anger, "But before the thief died, CCEE destroyed many precious antiquities. This is also the main reason why I came to you. I wonder if you have heard of Yushink City Auction." "Of course I've heard of this." Next to him, Crollo interjected, "I heard that there is the largest auction house in the world, with all kinds of money, wealth, antiquities and treasures. This guy lies without changing his face, tisk tisk tisk." Touching the black devil clasped on his left arm, Huang Quan resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "Now that you know, it's okay." Nodding with satisfaction, Fripp smiled meaningfully and said, "Then you won't refuse my next commission, right?" "Commission?" Huang Quan seemed to suddenly say, "Elder. Do you want us to go with you to Yuxin City to help you identify treasures and antiquities?" "Of course not." Flip shook his head and said with a half-smile, "As an elder of Meteor Street, my status means that I cannot step out of Meteor Street at will." Hearing this, Huang Quan's pupils narrowed and he looked at Crollo, with a trace of solemnity flashing in his eyes. Sure enough, the plan never kept up with the changes. Based on what the other party said, are you planning to go to Yushink City to attend the auction in person? In this way, wouldn't his conspiracy with Crollo become a joke? However, at this time. So, Izumi, picking up the wine glass in front of him, Flip took a sip and said with a relaxed expression, "At that time, I need you to follow an employer as an appraiser to attend the Yushink City auction. When the time comes, I will send Cass and Baruto to protect you, and what you have to do is to identify the truly precious collection of ancient artifacts as much as possible, do you understand?" "Hold on." A strange color flashed in Huang Quan's eyes, and he seemed to be confused. "I wonder if I heard it wrong. The elder said that I should go alone with your escort." "That's right." Glancing at Huang Quan, Fripp smiled like a tiger. "What's the problem? I have a batch of collections coming in a few days, and the presence of an appraiser is indispensable for this. Both of you have top appraisal skills, so only one of you can go. What? You don't agree? The words were not spoken. The 5 people standing behind Fripp had the chi surrounding them boiling slightly. 5 pairs of indifferent eyes were fixed on Huang Quan, and an inexplicable sense of oppression loomed around them. Tisk. Feeling the threat, Huang Quan lowered his head slightly to hide the murderous intent in his eyes. When he raised his head again, he nodded and said with a smile, "It's a very reasonable allocation. When will we set off?" 12 o'clock noon 2 days later. Seeing that Huang Quan was familiar with current affairs, Fripp waved his hand with satisfaction and said, "When you get to the intersection of Dongcheng District, someone will naturally come to pick you up. Remember, you have only one mission, to identify real antiquities and treasures. The more there are, the more rewards you will get, but if what you bring back are all fake, you should know what the consequences will be, right? This is an exchange of interests between outsiders and the elders of Meteor Street. But every elder's needs are different. What the mountain beast Fripp needs is precious antiquities and treasures. As the top force in Meteor Street, since I know his preferences, the employers of the gangsters will naturally follow their preferences, just like this time at the Yukexan auction. In order to obtain some kind of benefit exchange, they will take pictures of antiques and treasures and give them to Philip as a reward. However, it has always been difficult to distinguish the authenticity of antiquities. Even as an elder, Kai receives many fakes from time to time. Therefore, this is one of the reasons why Fripp will arrange for his own appraiser to follow every time the Yukexan auction begins. No more nonsense. Putting down the wine glass, Fripp said calmly, "If you want to be rewarded, do your work well. If I can't see you in 2 days, there is no need for the spider to exist." That's great. Hearing this, Huang Quan glanced at Flipu strangely, and then glanced at Lian Luoluo. Yes, after all, it has only been about a month since the spiders split and Death and Phantom were established, and they are still in a low-key state. I can only say that this guy's intelligence system is really worse than I expected. Beside, Krollo's eyes became colder and colder. Especially when he noticed Huang Quan's weird peripheral vision, he felt even colder. Don't forget, Maki and the others were once a member of the spiders. Ah, as if he guessed what Krollo was thinking, Huang Quan looked at Flip with a smile on his face with indifferent eyes. I understand. Is there anything else, Elder? Remember the time. As a reminder again, Flip waved his hand and said, "Send them out." Yes, Balutu nodded on the side, stretched out his hand and gestured toward the door. "Please, you two. See this." Huang Quan and Huang nodded, got up and walked towards the door. When you reach the gate of the castle, Huang Quan turned around and glanced at the figure of Balutu, who turned away, smacking his tongue and saying, "How's it going? How do you feel about all your plans being disrupted?" "I have become accustomed to it." Krollo glanced at Huang Quan, turned around and walked outside the gate and made a hidden gesture. Suddenly, several figures of different heights on the southeast side disappeared into the darkness not far away. Execution is good. Walking towards the distance, Huang Quan shook his head slightly and said regretfully, "This Hongmen banquet is really boring. I thought I could solve this hidden danger tonight." Only then did the 3 lurking figures on the west and north sides move in Huang Quan's direction. "What are you going to do next?" Following behind, Krollo glanced at Shalnark and others in the distance, and said coldly, "Since the plan has changed, the previous plan needs to be replanned." "What's the plan?" With his hands inserted into the black windbreaker, Huang Quan said with an indifferent expression and murderous intent in his eyes, "The advantage of intelligence lies in us. Since I have been arranged to go to Yuxin, then the guys who come with me will be left to us, the god of death, to deal with. I just don't know. Can you, Phantom, solve the trouble here?" "No problem." Krollo glanced at Huang Quan in surprise and said coldly, "You and I have speculated about Nen from Flipward before. Aren't you worried that all of the other parties, clones, have gone to Yuxin City with you?" "You said it was just speculation." The corners of Huang Quan's mouth raised slightly. The charm of Nen lies in this. As long as the will is strong, in the case of equivalent exchange, some troublesome problems can always be solved. For example, the distance of controlling the clone. Speaking of which, Huang Quan paused, turned right and walked into the alley on the right, waving his hands and saying with a smile, let's say goodbye, Captain Crollo. I hope you won't become a disappearing corpse when we meet next time. Snort. Watching Huang Quan disappear into the alley with no expression on his face, Crollo snorted and turned to the alley on the left, where Pyknoden and others were watching with different expressions. In stark contrast to Maki and others who appeared silently behind Huang Quan on the right. At the same time, inside the castle, seeing Balutu returning from seeing someone off, the obese Fripp had a strange look in his eyes. He lowered his head slightly and picked up the wine glass on the coffee table, mockingly saying, "What? Are you going to continue to pretend? Everyone. Don't go too far, Kaiser." Staring at Flip coldly, Cass said indifferently, "We did not split you up to let you mock us." Ridicule. After taking a sip of red wine that was as red as blood, Kaiser sneered, "Isn't this what it should be? A group of wastes that rely on foreign objects. Awakened ones, there are only 6 of us left, and to waste a spot on Ketzler, a loser, is such a stupid plan. There is no other way." At this time, Anori, who was standing not far away and was as thin as a bamboo pole, said with a cold expression, "Without enough precious treasures, the degree of control is extremely limited. If we don't eliminate other conscious people, we will all fall into mental chaos and even perish in the end. But the control distance has been extended, hasn't it?" On the right, Dulia, a woman with a bumpy figure but an ordinary appearance, smiled charmingly and said, "This is not necessarily a bad thing. At least when some people go out to look for antique collections, others can sit in Meteor Street. In this way, we can avoid being annihilated by the entire army in the event of an accident. Let's end this topic that we know very well." Ketzel, who was sitting on the sofa, wrote lightly, "By the way, I remember the employer this time is Jones Buckney, the affiliated gangster under 10 Old Men, right? Are you sure that his relationship with 10 Old Man is not deep?" "Well, the information has been confirmed." Cass nodded and said expressionlessly, "This guy's gang has a relationship with the gang directly under 10 Old Man in the form of paying protection fees. There are countless gangs like this all over the world. Even if they disappear suddenly, no one will pay attention." L. Gudong. Hearing this, Katzel took a big gulp of the wine in his glass, a trace of bloodlust flashing in his eyes. "In this case, no one will have any objection to us swallowing all the assets and antiquities of the other party, right? Then, where's that kid?" Dulia licked her lower lip, smiled softly and said, "Although he hides it very deeply, I can clearly see in my eyes a trace of weakness and anger in him." "Oh, is Nyen really hidden?" Ketzel wrote lightly, "But with Crollo at hand, it's enough to handle the appraisal. As for the kid who made Yuri and the 4 of them disappear, let him and Jones disappear completely." The lingering sound gradually dissipated in the spacious hall. The 6 figures, each with different gender, body shape, and appearance, have a high degree of consistency in their expressions at this moment. Just like one person, exuding a strange aura. In the alley. Ta 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 ta. In the quiet and dark environment, there were several subtle footsteps. Captain Shalnark, who had been following behind for a long time, said calmly, "I think just now was the best time to take action. After careful observation, there are only about 6 people exuding the aura of the ninja within the wall. This should be enough for us and Phantom to deal with." "That's not the point." Turning his head slightly, Huang Quan said calmly, "As I have analyzed with you before, when it is impossible to determine the number of puppets that Flip can control, the most effective way is to pull them all out of Yusheng City. It's just that this time there were some changes in the plan." Misfortune, Shalnark thought. Does it mean that Fripp doesn't plan to go to Yusheng City to participate in the auction in person? Good. Huang Quan nodded in admiration and said, "As you might think, maybe we made an error in our judgment of Fripp Nen, or maybe his Nen has undergone other changes during this period. So, intelligence is certainly important, but for us, temporary adaptability is the key to survival and victory. Let's go. Since we have reached cooperation with Phantom, let them leave this to them. As for you, just follow me to Friendly City. When you go back, put all the things you want to bring with you temporarily. I'm in space. After dealing with Fripp, let's go out and see a different scenery. The world is very exciting. Don't let this sesame-sized meteor street in front of you limit your horizons. In short, I hope that you will be present during my future journey to the Dark Continent. Hear these words. Shalnark, Shizuku, and Maki looked at each other. Although they have matured their thinking while living in Meteor Street, their concept of the world still only exists in Meteor Street. Even Shalnark, who is always good at thinking calmly, seems to understand. To this, seeing the three people nodding in understanding, Huangquan couldn't help but laugh and shook his head. Obviously, they still don't understand the meaning of what he said. But this seed has been planted. Whether it will sprout in the future can only be seen by themselves. Ta ta ta. Accompanied by footsteps, the surrounding environment became increasingly quiet and dim. When the four of them walked for more than 10 minutes chatting, they were about to enter the East Street area. Despair. Suddenly, a red-haired figure appeared in a dead end not far away. This time, Hisoka did not carry out the killing act like before. Instead, he leaned against the side wall quietly, staring at Huangquan with his slender eyes. This is the fourth time we have met. Stopping, Huangquan looked at Hisoka, smiled slightly and said, "How is it? Are you ready to reply to my previous invitation?" Hisoka. Rear side. After hearing Huangquan's words, Maki and others also observed Hisoka attentively. To be invited again and again by the group leader, this guy must have exceptional abilities in some aspect. Yeah, ha. The corners of Hisoka's mouth curled up, revealing a slightly exaggerated and excited smile. His fair and slender fingers even covered his face, and his trembling pupils exuded a strange feeling. Your invitation has troubled me for more than a month. Finally, I thought of a perfect solution. After a pause, Hisoka leaned forward slightly and began to tremble with excitement as he spoke. I have been looking forward to a suitable and powerful opponent. If you want to be my captain, you can. The prerequisite is to defeat me and surrender to me. If you fail, let me destroy you completely, ha. The other side. He's so weird. Shizuku wrinkled his little nose and said, and it's very dangerous. That's right. Seeing the other person's expression and the dangerous aura, Maki frowned and came to Huangquan's side, saying softly, Quan. Captain, do you have to invite him? This guy is very special, don't worry, let me handle it. Smiling, Huangquan slowly took off his windbreaker and handed it to Maki. He turned to look at Hisoka, who was full of excitement and fighting spirit, and smiled slightly. After all, this is the fourth time we've met, so it wouldn't be nice if I didn't give an explanation. Then, as you wish, Hisoka. I hope you are strong enough and righteous now. Suck. The opponent's calm demeanor made Hisoka's fighting spirit suddenly burst out. In an instant, the chi around him surged and boiled, distorting the evil aura, and tipped towards Huangquan's position. Swish, brush, brush. As if their hair was exploding, Shalnark and the others that Puyi came into contact with suddenly retreated several meters with solemn expressions. Come. In response, Huangquan's chi burst out of his body, forming strong in an instant. At the same time, the aura containing murderous intent pushed back up, directly colliding with Hisoka's aura. That's awesome, Izumi. A happy voice sounded. Next moment, Hisoka, who quickly closed the distance with Huangquan, suddenly stopped, and his hands behind him seemed to be pulling something. Seeing this situation, Huangquan's eyes narrowed slightly. Information about the other party Nen instantly appeared in my mind. However, at this moment, from the darkness of the shadow, rock bricks the size of a human head were launched towards Huangquan at extremely fast speeds. Sure enough, it's flexible love. Obviously, when Hisoka rushed towards him, he stuck stretchable love to the rock fragments around him, and then used the stretchable properties of rubber to stretch it to the extreme, thus making the rocks look like sharp arrows. Stealth and swiftness. Hisoka did this naturally to test the opponent and calculate suitable attack opportunities. Light. Seeing the sound of rocks breaking through the air becoming more and more clear in his ears, Huangquan's expression remained unchanged, and the white thought energy around him expanded and spread. Swish. As the rock entered the diffusion range of the white mental energy, the lightness characteristic was activated instantly. For a moment, the rock, which was originally menacing and extremely fast, was wrapped in white energy and its weight dropped dramatically, and it slowly fell to the ground like a feather. Seeing this situation, a strange color flashed in Hisoka's eyes. He quickly added the information about the opponent in his mind. At the same time, he quietly followed him on the right side of the rock, and used the rock to block the moment to clenched his fist and hit Huang Quan. The white right fist, wrapped in pink mind energy, was extremely fast and had a weird angle. When blocked by the falling rock, it instantly turned into an arc from the dead corner on the right, aiming directly at Huang Quan's Adam's apple and chin. Bang! A muffled sound followed. Hisoka looked intently, and his pupils suddenly shrank. In the blink of an eye, his blind attack was instantly intercepted by the opponent's right arm, and the intensity of the interception actually gave him an unshakable sense of strength. In response, Huang Quan, who used black energy to increase his weight, easily blocked Hisoka's blind spot attack, but this did not mean that he would outsmart the opponent. From beginning to end, his attention was focused on all parts of Hisoka's body, especially his limbs. After all, with the characteristics of flexible love, once Hisoka sticks it to any part of his body, it will cause fatal and serious consequences. This is the importance of intelligence. Prophets and unknowns often produce greatly different results. At this time, realizing that his own strength was inferior to the opponent's, Hisoka calmly withdrew his right hand from the opponent's right palm, twisted and swung his body, and then slapped Huang Quan's temple hard before his eyes turned into a whip-shaped afterimage. Seeing this, Huang Quan narrowed his eyes slightly and took a step forward, but instead of retreating and dodging, he lunged forward and cut into Hisoka's abdomen and chest. His 5 fingers were put together like a black épée, and he slammed into Hisoka's abdomen. Stretch. In an instant, Hisoka tightened his body and yanked with his left hand. At some point, the rubber thread stuck to the right wall tightened and retracted. He quickly retreated with his body, avoiding Huang Quan's bombardment. His right hand pulled again. And this time, boom! As the rubber thread tightened and retracted, the pink thread that had been quietly clinging to Huang Quan's palm suddenly exerted force, trying to pull it towards Hisoka. Heavy. Feeling the huge pulling force, Huang Quan stagnated his body, with a calm expression, causing the black thought energy around him to expand rapidly. The heavy characteristic was like a sea-fixing needle, causing his weight to continue to increase rapidly. It doesn't take a while. No matter how Hisoka activated the retraction feature, he was shocked to find that he could not shake the opponent's body as heavy as a mountain at all. What the hell is this? After coming back to his senses, Hisoka narrowed his slender eyes and activated the rubber thread in his hand again, but this time he no longer pulled it toward the opponent, but targeted himself. Call out. In an instant, Hisoka's body flew upside down like lightning, jumping quickly back and forth on the left and right walls of the dead end. Not long after, under the influence of stretchable love, Hisoka's speed became faster and faster until it turned into an afterimage and disappeared. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Watching the afterimages passing by around him, Huang Quan's eyes were calm, and the blackness around him spread as far as possible. Although his transmuter mental capacity expansion is only 5%, for now, it is enough to cover Hisoka's body. As long as the other party dares to make a surprise attack, he will let him know what it means to be as heavy as a mountain. Far away, while watching the silent battle in front of them, Shalnark and Maki's expressions became more solemn. Unlike Shizuku, who is still young, they have experienced many life and death battles, and they know very well that with the strength and abilities these two people are showing at the moment, if they are allowed to go. 1 minute. Looking at the looming afterimage in the distance, Maki said solemnly, "No wonder the leader is so fond of that guy. This is really weird. If I were to fight him, I can only hold on for about a minute at this stage. His powers are a lot like rubber." Using condensation to observe the entire battlefield, Shalnark thought calmly, "Have you noticed that the regiment leader has not made any unnecessary movements since the beginning of the battle? This shows that the group leader has figured out the opponent's NEN information. This is also the importance of intelligence information that the group leader has always emphasized. If I fight him, it will definitely result in a disastrous defeat. There are many factors in combat, but the most important thing is that my fighting style is close to close combat. If I can't get rid of this guy at the beginning of the contact, I will be entangled to death. Rubber, stickiness, stretch, it's really a powerful thing. Just one kind of NEN contains a variety of complementary properties. Once you become an enemy with this guy, you must not fight in a narrow area. Well, you are also powerful enough." Looking strangely at Shalnark, who was analyzing and thinking, Maki couldn't help but think of what Izumi said before, describing Shalnark as suitable for gathering intelligence. With this guy's way of thinking, it would really be a pity not to collect intelligence. Why didn't she notice it before? Thinking of this, Maki shook his head slightly and returned his gaze to the battlefield. Just at this time, Hisoka, who had been ejecting at an extremely fast speed, quickly attacked Huang Quan from the blind spot on the right rear side. Coming. In an instant, Huang Quan felt the sharp wind blowing from behind him. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his thoughts flowed at a rapid speed, flowing towards the neck where the touch was most obvious. Bang! The sound of collision suddenly sounded. What? Looking at the neck that was hit by him but not broken at all, Hisoka's eyes were filled with shock as he stagnated in midair. And this is the gap between advanced application skills. For Hisoka, who grew up freely according to instinct and wildness, such a weird scene is simply incomprehensible. After all, the manipulation of thought he understands is equivalent to superpowers, which strengthen and enhance itself through the flow of chi. As for advanced application skills, he has no such concept in his mind. Even if he uses similar skills, it is only based on his natural instinct. Snapped. Using flow, he concentrated 80% of his offensive and defensive power on his neck to accurately resist the opponent's attack. Huang Quan looked calm and took advantage of the moment when the opponent was in the air to twist his feet. His right hand, which was ready to attack, quickly turned into an arc. Grab the other person's right forearm, which is at the neck. Heavy. In an instant, black mental energy was like a surging wave, covering Hisoka's whole body from Hisoka's forearms in an instant, and the weight characteristics suppressed Hisoka's body at a speed beyond imagination. Boom! The sharply increased gravity slammed Hisoka directly to the ground, causing a human-shaped pit to be directly smashed into the ground. For a moment, Hisoka couldn't help but let out a groan, even with the entanglement and protection of his thoughts, and his slender eyes turned white. However, just as Huang Quan changed the weight of the opponent's body, he lifted and hit the other side. Ah, what a joy! Hisoka, who was swung into the air, smiled strangely and bit the tip of his tongue fiercely, causing his head to wake up. At the same time, the fingers of his right arm, which was tightly grasped by the other party, were suddenly clasped together. Stretch. Immediately, the stretchable glove that was stuck to Huang Quan's neck during the previous attack immediately tightened, and the many pink rubber threads attached to the walls on both sides activated their retracting properties at the same time. Well, this is. Even with Huang Quan's current weight, he couldn't bear the forceful pulling of his slender neck in the direction, and his heavy body leaned backward hastily. Seeing this, Hisoka's right forearm in midair twisted suddenly and broke free from the opposite direction of Huang Quan's tiger's mouth. His white hands grabbed Huang Quan's right arm and used the force to turn around. His waist was strangely folded in half, and he condensed his thoughts. The right knee rushed towards Huang Quan's head quickly. Light. Huang Quan realized that he could not escape in an instant, and his body was being pulled by both sides. His eyes froze, and his mind suddenly changed from heavy to light, causing the black energy to turn into energy in an instant. The body as heavy as a mountain became as light as a feather. With the flowing wind caused by the impact of Hisoka's knees and the pulling of the rubber thread, Huang Quan's figure was like a feather swept by the strong wind, floating left and right in the air, filled with energy. Feeling weird. However, in this weird way, it can directly resolve the offensive impact that interrupted Hisoka. That's really nice, Nen. With an understatement of praise, Huang Quan glanced at the pink rubber thread stuck to the back of his neck and right hand, as well as the dense attachment points on the walls on both sides, and the corners of his mouth could not help but curl up slightly. Open the door. The black and white thought energy formed a fingertip on his left hand. When Hisoka fell to the ground with a surprised and puzzled expression, Huang Quan stretched out his left hand and gently tapped the rubber thought thread on his right arm and neck. In an instant, Gate directly activated its domineering characteristics. Based on Huang Quan's thoughts, the door of separation was formed instantly. I saw that on the rubber thought line. The door of the rubber thought line was directly formed where Huang Quan's fingertips were touched. The separation door formed by his thoughts and will caused half of the rubber thought line at the neck to be separated. The door remained, while the other half of the door followed the rubber breath. In Hisoka's shocked expression, he retreated directly into the walls on both sides and his hands. What the hell is he, Nen? Seeing this, Hisoka, who had always been confident, couldn't help but doubt his life. After all, the ability that I was so proud of was easily cracked by others in such an understatement and in such a weird way. Snap. What, are you admitting defeat? Landing gently on his toes, Huang Quan looked at Hisoka's somewhat confused expression, waved his hand, and said with a slight smile, people always have to face various unexpected situations, and confusion can sometimes lead to death. Don't be too confident in your nen. There are countless nen in the world, and some of them are incompatible with each other. What do you think, Hisoka? What an unpleasant smile. After coming back to his senses, Hisoka licked his lower lip, stared at Huang Quan's slender eyes with a hint of weirdness, and rushed toward Huang Quan again. Whoosh! The distance got closer, Hisoka's body exploded into the air, and his right leg swept towards Huang Quan's right temple like an afterimage whip. This is not like you. Seeing this, Huang Quan looked calm. His right hand, which was covered with black and white fingertips, quickly formed a defensive posture and stood in front of the temple. The fingertips including the palm were flowing with black and white colors. With a sneer, Hisoka's right leg was suddenly pulled up into the sky by the rubber energy. His body was like an upside-down top, accumulating power and slashing straight down. His lean left leg showed a feeling of power like a battle axe. Too slow. Complying with the opponent's changes, at the moment when the opponent strikes, the left hand hidden at the waist, wrapped in a black and white finger cut straight through the opponent's left leg wrapped with a lot of thought energy like a dragon out of the sea. Revolving door. In an instant, the characteristics of the door were activated again. The gate of flesh quickly took shape. I saw that with she ankle as the center, the heel and calf were twisted and deformed, turning into a rotating door like the entrance of a hotel. Gulu gulu. Seeing something strange happening to his left leg, Hisoka's right hand tugged hard as he was falling, and under the influence of stretchy love he tried to retract to the wall on the right. Who knew? At this moment, Huang Quan, who had already observed this with condensation, jumped up lightly due to the characteristics of the white air. His black and white finger cots gently touched the rubber thread pulling Hisoka, and the door to separation instantly opened. Launch. Suddenly, the rubber thought energy separated directly. Again, seeing Hisoka's whereabouts, he tried to pull again with his left hand. Huang Quan raised his eyebrows, and the hands with black and white finger gloves turned into afterimages, and flashed across Hisoka's other three limbs and the upper part of his head. Revolving door. In an instant, Hisoka's limbs and head spun quickly, and under the pull of his retractable love, he crashed into the wall on the left. Boom! A heavy collision sounded. Hisoka, whose hands and feet were spinning and unable to balance and control his body, fell to the ground like a doll, and the eyes and ears on his head kept rotating 360 degrees. The only normal thing is the mouth that Huang Quan deliberately left for him. Ah, this strange feeling of pleasure is also very good. Gulu gulu. Looking at Hisoka, whose limbs and facial features were spinning, but whose expression was full of intoxication and confusion, Huang Quan frowned slightly, stretched out his right hand to grab the rotating head, and used his mental energy to cover it and release the close the door feature. Crunch. In an instant, Hisoka's head returned to normal, while the rest of his limbs were still spinning. That's it for now. Huang Quan slowly stood up and straightened his slightly messy windbreaker. Huang Quan glanced at Zissou indifferently with his calm eyes looking down. Tell me, your answer. Da. After recovering from his intoxication, Hisoka looked up at Huang Quan with a sickly look on his face. After joining, can I still challenge you? Can. As if he had read through Hisoka's thoughts, Huang Quan's right hand passed through the twisted limbs that were constantly rotating like an afterimage, and then turned around and walked towards Maki and the others. The premise is that you can be strong enough to satisfy me, otherwise this kind of battle will be too boring. Remember, since you have joined death, you are not allowed to attack other members without my permission. Your number is tentatively designated as number 4. If you are not satisfied, come to me later. Ha ha ha. Satisfied, very satisfied. Licking the blood that had been stained on his lips for some time, Hisoka straightened up eerily from the ground and stared at Huang Quan's back like a sick man. What a delicious fruit, Captain. In the distance, Shalnark, who saw Huang Quan finishing the battle and happened to notice Hisoka's abnormal expression, couldn't help but rub the goosebumps on his arms. Captain, I always feel that inviting that guy to join the God of Death is not a pleasant thing. Aha. Beside them, Maki and Shizuku nodded in unison. Especially Maki. When he first met Hisoka, he felt particularly displeased. I just invite the other party to join the decision made by Quan, and I won't object to it. Don't look at him being so, perverted. Turning his head and seeing Hisoka's cute expression, Huang Quan twitched his lips, waved his hands and led everyone towards Maki's house. But people are still very reliable, only if he is very interested in this matter. Now his target is me. He will settle down for the time being. In the future, I will take him to the Dark Continent. Speaking of this, Huang Quan glanced behind him. At this moment, Hisoka's figure has disappeared into the dark shadows. It seems that the group leader values that guy very much. After understanding the meaning of the words, Shalnark looked thoughtful in his eyes. Maggie changes. Only Shizuku, who had put everything behind him, licked the rye candy and followed Huang Quan obediently, and the breath that was missing from his body was wrapped around her little by little. Ta 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 ta. Not long after, the four figures also disappeared into the shadows around the corner. The surroundings were once again shrouded in darkness. Time flies. 2 days passed quietly. The scorching sun seemed a little weak under the cover of haze-like mist. The sky was gloomy as usual. At the intersection of East District. Arriving at the interface at the appointed time, he saw that there were only 6 people in the usually bustling exit. A strange color flashed in Huang Quan's eyes. He turned the metal blade with his fingers without stopping, but walked directly over. Among the 6 people, 3 of them were unknown. One seemed to be a guard in the Elder's living room at that time, and the other 2 were Cass and Batulu. Interesting. Huang Quan narrowed his eyes slightly. What is certain now is that Cass and Bataru are already within his certain range, but he doesn't know how many of the other 4 are clones of the mountain beast. Who is this deity? At this time, the 6 people who had been waiting on the street naturally noticed Huang Quan's arrival at the first time. Except for Cass, the other 5 people showed dissatisfaction. However, what makes Huang Quan interesting is the anger of these guys can clearly be felt, but no one takes the lead. It is as if they are being suppressed, and the dissatisfaction can only be dissatisfaction. Is it Cass? Or, walking to the side of everyone, Huang Quan glanced at everyone and raised the corners of his mouth in a subtle way. It's all disguise. It cannot be ruled out that everyone present is Fripp's clone. Suddenly, it seemed that the atmosphere was too quiet. One of the 3 people Huang Quan had never seen before, a burly man with a sleek comb and a black suit, frowned and made a sound. Everyone is here. Where's the car? Didn't I say we'd leave on time? Coming. The person on the right is wearing a cloak to hide his figure, and his hoarse voice reveals indifference. At this time, his right hand, which is covered by the cloak, is pointing to the far left side of the garbage mountain. There was a faint shadow there, heading quickly towards their direction. As the black shadow gradually approached, an elongated gray truck that looked like a specially made plate appeared in everyone's sight. Similar to the style of a garbage truck. During this time, Huang Quan was used to seeing garbage trucks nearby. With just a glance, Huang Quan could tell that this approaching truck seemed to be a converted garbage truck. No matter the color or general style, they are exactly the same. The quality of this guy Fripp is really unique. Resisting the urge to roll his eyes, Huang Quan followed Cass and others and quietly waited for the arrival of the vehicle. In about tens of seconds, the large gray truck made a big turn and pointed the carriage towards them. The driver did not get out of the car, but the iron door of the carriage opened on its own with a click. Suddenly, the scene of a luxuriously decorated carriage appeared. The splendid interior decoration, gorgeous and soft long sofas on both sides, several special black refrigerators, 3-sided full-screen TVs, obsidian-like coffee tables. This guy actually did this. After suppressing his slight surprise, Huang Quan saw Cass and others entering the car in a familiar manner, so he followed him and sat alone in a corner suitable for observing the overall situation. As everyone got on the car, the door closed automatically. The 3-sided full-screen TV in the car only dimmed for a second, and some TV programs about the outside world appeared on the screen. The truck also started slowly and drove away towards the outside world. Huang Quan, who was sitting in the car and didn't feel any vibration at all, glanced at the TV program, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. Whether it is the shock-absorbing effect or the wirelessly placed TV, it fully reflects the sense of technology that Meteor Street does not have. You must know that it is 1986. He still remembers the scene in the original book when Lirio bargained for a mobile phone. That time period not even close to now. Therefore, for those with money and power, even new gadgets that appear 10 years from now may be remnants of what they have been playing for a long time. Huang Quan's eyes returned to calmness, and he was always looking at the other 6 people from the corner of his eyes. The driver's position was blocked from view by the baffle, but the behavior of the 6 people since they got in the car made him have some suspicions. Not to mention Cass and Bataru, who have already been exposed. The man in a suit with his head turned back, sitting at the front on the opposite side, seems to be a little reserved at the moment. Wang Li, as if he has never seen such a gorgeous carriage scene, and the man in the cloak still shrouded in a cloak. He sat alone in the deserted area on the other side with his whole body naked. The other Huang Quan had never seen before. He was a black figure wearing a camouflage vest with a curled head and a body like black ink. He behaved casually from the moment he got in the car. The wine in the black refrigerator was consumed by him quickly, even if he was beaten by Cass. Even after scolding him, he just continued to drink with a playful smile, seemingly showing no fear of Cass. Are talented people bold, or is he the real person? While thinking, the metal knife was still spinning steadily on Huang Quan's fingertips. However, Huang Quan could also feel that several eyes were observing him unscrupulously, as if they were not worried about his reaction at all. Just testing. Huang Quan's face was calm. His eyes were always staring at the TV program on the opposite side, as if he was not aware of his sight at all. Gradually, the truck seemed to leave the Meteor Street area, and at a certain moment it accelerated in vain until it reached more than 100 kilometers. Crunch. Suddenly, the shield that originally blocked the driver slowly lowered. The carriage fell silent. Everyone's eyes turned to the direction of the cab. I saw 2 figures wearing gray isolation suits and gas masks sitting in the cab of the truck at this time. This is a temporary ID card prepared for you. A slightly deep voice sounded, and the figure sitting in the co-pilot turned his head and looked at everyone, and then accurately threw something similar to a card onto the coffee table in front of everyone. As long as it is within the scope of Urbian continent, it can basically be passed, but there is a time limit. It will be recycled when you return to Meteor Street. After hearing this, Huang Quan directly picked up the ID card in front of him and looked at it carefully. The size and style of the card are similar to ordinary bank cards. His temporary information is recorded on the front of the card, but the name only has the character, Quan, and the others are some random made-up identity codes. It seems that Yukushin's location is not close to Meteor Street. The identity card in his left hand disappeared in an instant. Huang Quan glanced at the others and put them all away after just one glance, as if he had become accustomed to this. No more nonsense. I am contact person Aiken. Ignoring everyone's silence, the gas-masked man sitting in the passenger seat turned back to stare at the desolate scene outside the car and said in a low voice. The destination is Cali City Airport, which is the closest to Meteor Street. Only there is a spaceship to Yucsun. It takes about 5 hours to drive. Some of you are veterans, and you must also know that if you want to obtain an identity document that can be used throughout the continent, you can only cooperate with outside gangs, and this time is no exception. The one we are cooperating with this time is the Nasla family, which is considered the latest rising star family in the gang. All you have to do is serve as their temporary bodyguards before the end of the Yucsun auction house. Gangster, bodyguard, Nasla. Huang Quan frowned slightly. He also needs to cooperate with gangsters as bodyguards, which is a bit beyond his expectation. This was not part of the original plan. Sure enough, plans often fail to keep up with changes. Thinking of this, Huang Quan's brows relaxed and he regained his composure. On the other hand, the name Nasla family sounds a bit familiar. It is a gangster force that appeared in the original work. The bodyguard mission is very simple. Quote, Aiken said in a low voice. Serve as the bodyguard of the leader of Nasla, be responsible for the other party's personal safety, and kill all incoming enemies. You will know the specific situation when you arrive at the spaceship. The elders have already discussed the remuneration with the other party. The delivery will be carried out when you return to Meteor Street. Next, Aiken will tell you what needs to be paid attention to. The most eye-catching thing is that if you can be valued by the gang, you have a chance to be bought by the other party and escape the shackles of Meteor Street. Huang Quan is not interested in this. If you are interested, perhaps the only thing Aiken mentioned is the remuneration. Presumably it has something to do with collectibles. Observing the unchanging expressions of Cass and others, Huang Quan squinted his eyes slightly, thought for a moment and then shook his head secretly. Forget it, regardless of whether it is a collectible with Nian or not, the chance of him returning to Meteor Street is extremely slim. The required mental tools cannot be solved by just one or two items. If you want to become stronger quickly, Yukishin, known as the Auction City, is obviously a good target. What's more, Maki and others have already joined his air gate, so there is no point in going back. On the contrary, Hisoka has disappeared without a trace since he was defeated that day, and there is no trace at all. He could only leave a note at Maki's house as a reminder. Anyway, with Hisoka's personality, Meteor Street can't keep him at all. At this time, Aiken's voice suddenly stopped. It seemed that everything that needed to be said had been said. The moment his voice stopped, the lowered baffle rose again, completely isolating the cab. The carriage became silent again. Compared with before, the expressions of everyone at this stage have become different. Time also passed bit by bit in silence. Until several hours passed. The large truck traveling at high speed gradually slowed down until it came to a complete stop. Crunch. The carriage door opens automatically. The dazzling sunlight shines in from outside the door. Come out. Aiken's deep voice came from outside. Hearing this, Huang Quan, who was sitting in the corner, jumped out of the car first and his calm eyes immediately fell on the butler team not far away. Uniform black tuxedo style, and uniform black and white maid clothing. There is also a tall and straight posture and rigorous formation. Just one glance can tell anyone who sees them what their profession is. Ta. Wait for everyone to get off the bus. Aiken turned to look at the head housekeeper. The next step is up to you, Butler Liamu. It's them. Looking at Huang Quan in surprise, who still had a childish look on his face, Butler Liamu nodded, made an elegant guiding motion, and walked towards the spaceship that was prepared in the distance. Aiken, on the other hand, turned around, got in the car, and drove out of the airport. Cali Municipal Airport. The first impression that gave Huang Quan was one of vastness. Where he looked, huge airbag-like spaceships were parked in an orderly manner on the vast platform of the airport. Each platform had dedicated reception personnel and facilities, and each spacecraft track also had their vehicles picking up and dropping off passengers driving back and forth. The direction of technology is paradoxical. Following the crowd, Huang Quan looked at the huge fantasy spaceships, and couldn't help but wonder how their power was generated, and how did it compare to the speed of airplanes. If this technology had existed in the previous life, probably all aircraft except fighter jets would have been eliminated. While thinking, everyone quickly arrived at the waiting platform. Although it is said to be a platform, it is actually a large building with rows of seats and various facilities and equipment. Not long after, everyone who boarded the platform, led by Lu Mu and other housekeepers and maids, entered the spacecraft directly. As for the check-in procedure, they only took out the identity card they had obtained before and swiped it on a certain machine to gain entry. Butler Liamu. Walking to Butler Liamu, Huang Quan glanced at the passengers in front of him with different expressions and dressed in ordinary clothes, and frowned. Isn't this a private spaceship? That's right. Suddenly hearing Huang Quan's inquiry, the tall and thin housekeeper Liamu, who looked slightly older, had a strange look in his eyes. This is a public spacecraft. What you see now, except for us, are ordinary passengers. Before meeting the master, there is something I need to remind you of. Seeing the gazes of Cass and others, Butler Liamu said, this is the first time that our Nasla family has cooperated with your Meteor Street Council of Elders. Correspondingly, what is your strength and whether you can defend it in the future? It plays a role in the mission, but we still know nothing about it. Therefore, please be prepared to be tested at any time. Test. Why is it so numb? The man with the slumped back was about to complain, but he stopped immediately under Cass's sharp eyes, and suppressed the rest of his words. What is the test content? Bataru, who had been silent along the way, suddenly asked. Since you said it was random, then there must be a general range. Everyone on the scene is good at something different. Of course it's related to the defense mission. The unsmiling housekeeper Liamu had a cold look in his eyes. You will know later. After that, butler Liamu took steps again and walked towards the top of the spacecraft. Seeing this, everyone followed him one by one. Huang Quan, who deliberately fell at the back, glanced at several passengers wearing casual clothes and chatting not far away, with a flash of color in his calm eyes. He has long been accustomed to turning on condensation at all times to train his speed of condensing qi. Coincidentally, although it was only for a short 2 or 3 seconds, he did notice the subtle operation of the group of people not far away who suddenly gathered their thoughts. It seems that the next journey will not be too boring. Huang Quan's eyes narrowed slightly as he followed the crowd. The metal knife that was rotating hiddenly at his fingertips sank directly into his palm. Instead, black and white thoughts were gathering at his fingertips, ready to go out at any time. However, when people on both sides passed each other in the corridor, the group still had no intention of taking action. Not part of the test. Either they are ordinary passengers, or they are here for Nasla. The black and white thoughts inserted in the pocket of the windbreaker gradually disappeared, and the distance between the two groups became farther and farther, until they walked around the corner and climbed up the stairs and disappeared completely. Ta 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 ta. Not long after, butler Liamu led everyone to the top entrance. Here, there are 2 bodyguards wearing black suits and sunglasses holding detection equipment on guard. After everyone arrived, including Lu Mu, they were all inspected carefully. Beep beep beep. It doesn't take a while. The detection equipment beeped repeatedly. Weapons-related instruments are not allowed inside. Seeing that everyone's expressions turned ugly, butler Liamu reminded him lightly, I will naturally return the things to you after meeting the master. Listen to this. Cass and others could only take out the firearms and cold weapons hidden on their bodies and hand them to the security personnel on both sides. Viper pistol, tiger finger gloves, short blade dagger, bandage wire. Huang Quan, who was in the final test, glanced at the weapons of Cass and others with a thoughtful expression. At the same time, he showed the black demon fragment ring detected in his left hand to the security personnel. After making sure that there was no problem, he was directly taken away. Let it go. During this period, Cass and others turned their heads to take a look. After confirming that Huang Quan had not handed over any weapons, those who knew something about the 6th series of Nen suddenly had various speculations. Not 10 people paid attention to the revealed black demon. Please come with me, everyone. Seeing that everyone passed the test, butler Liamu greeted them and led them towards the door not far away. There were also 4 security personnel guarding the door over there. After a second inspection, it is determined that there are no problems. Crunch. It looks like wood, like iron, like a specially made alloy. Door slowly opens. Everyone followed Lu Mu into the room. Suddenly, a restaurant with a beautiful environment appeared in front of everyone. There are wide floor-to-ceiling windows, and the view of the sea of clouds outside the window reveals a holy beauty. The entire room is dark black, and in the middle of the room is a just right white dining table, matched with exquisitely carved white seats, and dark black. The colors create strong contrast. For a moment, the man with his head thrown back and others became constrained at a speed visible to the naked eye. Only 2 or 3 people, including Huang Quan, were able to remain calm. Lu Mu. Daughter, they the people sent from Meteor Street? Yes, sir, miss, as butler Liamu bowed respectfully towards the left side of the room. Everyone's eyes also turned around. I saw a man and a woman walking slowly out of the presidential suite located on the far left side of the room. Huang Quan looked around. The man should be in his 30s, with a tall and well-proportioned figure, a brown back hairstyle, a half-moon brown beard, and a black tunic-style suit, giving him a meticulous and dignified feeling. Next to him was an exquisite little girl of 7 or 8 years old, wearing a pink and white princess dress. She had a petite figure with long and short pink hair, and big blue eyes. She was holding a rabbit doll and looking at it. It looks innocent up there. Everyone, take a seat. As soon as Pooh appeared, he confirmed that Commander Nasla was in the leading position and took his daughter to sit down. After looking at everyone, he asked everyone to find their own chairs and sit down. When Cass and others saw this, they pulled out their chairs and sat down without the slightest hint of politeness. Huang Quan still found an inconspicuous corner to sit down. It took less than a moment to sit down. It turned out to be her. Huang Quan, who already felt that the other person looked familiar, flashed the figure of Kurapika in his mind, and then thought of his employer Neong, and then Neong's father Letnosla also appeared vaguely. Such a comparison, Huang Quan suddenly felt a little dumbfounded. The number of gangsters in this world is countless, and the time has advanced so many years, and Nyan Nasla is so young, he really didn't recognize it at first. So, Nyan's Nen was developed so early. No wonder Aiken introduced it like that when he introduced it before. Sitting in the corner, Huang Quan glanced thoughtfully at Ni Wang, who had been staring at him curiously since she first appeared. She shifted her body and used the vase on the dining table to block her view. Among all Nen, he is particularly uninterested in precognitive abilities. If possible, he didn't want to have anything to do with the other party at all. By the way, did Nyan die in the original novel? While thinking, Letnosla looked around and nodded. Let's serve. Today will be a celebration dinner for everyone. Yes, master. Butler Liamu came quietly behind Wright and patted his palms gently. The housekeepers and maids waiting in various positions took action, but only the dozen gang security personnel in the corner did not move. A moment of silence. Everyone, sitting in the main seat, Wright looked at the people on both sides of the dining table and said solemnly, "This is the first time for me, Nasla, to cooperate with Meteor Street. I hope you won't disappoint me. If the cooperation is happy, I don't mind spending a large amount of remuneration to buy you from the Meteor Street Elders Council, and return you to your freedom after a certain time limit. But, speaking of this," Wright's steady eyes swept over everyone present. "Only if I can see your value. Anyone who has done business knows that ineffective investment has always been the most disgusting thing. Except for some idiots with brain problems, no one will spend a huge price in exchange for a few wastes, right?" Everyone's eyes were slightly focused, but Huang Quan was still moving quietly, using several vases to avoid Ni Wang's prying eyes. "This little brat is so annoying." Huang Quan rolled his eyes vaguely, and simply ignored it after hiding to no avail. In response to this, Ni Wang, who had found it very interesting just now, suddenly stopped with a disappointed look on his face. He held the fork on the table in his right hand and kept poking the rabbit doll in his arms. From time to time, he stared at Huang with wide eyes. Quan. Cough. Noticing this scene, Wright coughed, carefully took the fork away from Neong, then looked at everyone and continued. Then, I look forward to your performance from now on. Quote. Until this moment, Letnosla had no intention of introducing himself. For him, this cooperation between the two parties is just a small test of initial contact. Even if he had to pay for 3 precious collections, it was still not within his scope of consideration. The only thing that worries him now, lest something goes wrong, is his precious daughter Neong, who is sitting next to him with a dissatisfied look on her face. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.